Peace. All right. Wait for some people to get in the room on time tonight. Got here nick of time. I'm gonna go ahead and get everything adjusted here. And we're gonna go ahead and get started shortly. As I said, actually made it on time, on the dot, actually a minute. I was about a minute early. But we're going to go ahead and start shortly. Just going to wait for a couple people to get in the room. Peace, Brother Dan. All right. Just going to wait. As usual, I'll go through a couple quick announcements in a minute. Usually do that in the beginning, just as we wait for some more people to come in the room. This way I don't have to repeat myself, because sometimes the same question might come up twice because somebody came in after the fact, etc. But we're going to get started in a minute. Just bear with me. Just going to wait for a few more people to show up. People slowly coming. This was a last minute. Peace, Sister Trina. Hope you're feeling it should be better now. Again, last minute. Tuesday, I'll be back on the regular Tuesdays. There was just a lot going on these last 2 weeks, so I kind of should be back to the regular schedule, popping on here and there, which I usually do. Fortunately, sometimes it's hard to give too much in advance notice with work and travel and things of that nature. So it's kind of hard to give I wish sometimes I can give away out in advance notice, but it's just I can't do it. Good, glad to hear you feeling better. My little guy, matter of fact, was just getting over, didn't even know he had it. He had walking pneumonia, believe it or not. We took him to the doctor when was that? Actually, not the beginning of this week, Monday and Tuesday. Because we noticed when he was sleeping, he was breathing a little funny, kind of felt fine. But, okay, so you had the same thing. Yeah, it must be going around, because apparently down here, it's been going around from what the doctors told us. I think I actually had it for a while and didn't even realize it. Yes. But, at least you got it, addressed. Key with that is getting it taken care of as quick as you can. But, yeah. All right, so real quick. What I'm going to do is go into some quick announcements. We really are getting the event organized with the itinerary. So it looks like right now we got 5 different presenters piece for the Friday event. We want to try to get everybody in the spot by 9:30. We're going to have a brief meet and greet. We'll have a little coffee and donuts there. Don't get religious if you don't drink coffee or donut. Nice stop. So we have several presentations planned for the day. If you are, I know a couple of you are flying from out of state, probably good if you can get in any time the day before, even if it's at nighttime, because as you know, the presentations will be pretty much the course of the day on Friday before we break and come back later in the evening to do the ritual that we have prepared, which we actually were organizing and working on this afternoon. So it's going to be a good day. We will also have products there. There will be books there, incense, oils. I know Sister Sonia is going to have our product of herbal products, soaps, lotions. So there will be items like that also available in this 2-day event thing that we're doing, something that we don't usually do. We did, I think, one about a year or so ago. We used to do 2-day events frequently, just became a little too taxing. So now we kind of try to do them once or twice a year. So this will be, the one for the last one for this year. And then we'll go back to the one a month thing. But again, we have several presentations prepared by different people. So this will be great. For individuals that haven't ever, attended an event or a ritual, this would be a good one, obviously, to come to because it's a 2-day event. And again, real quick, just to run through it before we get into tonight's topic. Again, Friday, pretty much from 9:30, 10 to 5, we will have different presentations by different people on topics. We have it's going to be interesting, a whole sex magic class prepared. We have a class on being a female on the left-hand path done by a female, Sister Sonia. We will have a class workshop on Luciferianism. We will have something on, I believe, vampirism. Brother Mike and Brother Jack will be presenting something. Not sure what they're presenting. They should have that information soon. So they'll be presenting something. So different workshops. So we'll do that. And we will break for lunch in the middle of the day, come back, finish up. This is the first day, Friday, the 26th. And then later that evening, we'll meet back up around 8 o'clock, a little bit before, and we will be performing. It's going to be a unique, trust me, this ritual is going to be unique. It's got 4 different parts and dynamics to it. It deals with activating the Luciferian or Lucifer aspect of yourself, or however you look at the aspect of what that represents to you. There's different parts to the ritual. I'm not going to really give too much of it away, so the experience isn't ruined for those that have not attended. There'll be 3 different areas set up for this ritual. You'll understand it when you actually come and participate in it for those that are coming. So that'll be later in the evening on that same day, the 26th. And then usually after the rituals, we go to a place called Flanagan's and kind of get our grub on. The second day, myself will be wrapping it all up and tying it in because the theme of this 2-day workshop or event is the journey of the Black Adept. You're going to understand that this is going to embody all aspects of what this path of quote unquote self-mastery is all about. You're going to get a lot of elements and different tools. So not the way we're trying to pass it across, but the way you'll be able to utilize these tools and get a good grasp of what this is really all about and how you can put it into perspective for yourself to make it work for yourself. That's the objective. That's the theme of this 2-day event, the journey of a Black Adept, because everything that we're going to discuss and talk about and the work we're going to do over the 2 days is all going to tie into that. That's the purpose. That's the goal of each individual that participates in this will leave after participating in this having a broader understanding of themselves, first and foremost, and having a whole new perspective on how they can approach it and work their magic and their path, etc. So on the second day, I will finish up. We will meet 12:30, and we'll be doing a class and open discussion on the journey of a Black Adept, kind of tying everything in we went over. You'll be able to ask questions. It'll be kind of more of a free exchange type of thing. We'll do that for a few hours, and then we will depart. We will meet up at the beach later that evening, 7 p.m. We will be setting up an altar on the beach to drum for the Igun, the Orishi, the Loa, spirits of the dead. There will be some work done out there. If you've attended the Papa Legba ritual or one of the Igun rituals in the past, similar type of ritual, but kind of unpredictable of what happens, what comes through. That'll be Saturday night. And after that, right across from the beach, there's a nice restaurant right on the intercoastal water. We will be gathering at, eating, and then we will finish up at the cemetery. So that's kind of, what we got going on for those 2 days. Again, the itineraries will be available upon arrival. Right when you show up, you'll have the itinerary, so you can kind of go by that if you're staying and you're visiting. It's a little easy for people local, obviously, people that regularly attend. So we kind of have this structured and with some order, and this way we can do things smoothly and get everything done that we need to get done. Very important. The registration fee, which I have on the flyer, it covers the whole event, both days. It's $25, and that covers the entire event. That covers the workshops. That covers participating in all the work that we're doing. We usually don't never charge for any of the events, especially the end of the month events. But because this is a little bit different, it's a 2-day event, a little work, time, effort, and things are put into it. And that we request you pay when you arrive. If you do want to pay prior, you can. I don't really prefer that because in case you don't show up, I don't have to worry about refunding anybody money. You can pay right when you arrive that morning, which is probably better. If you're 100% guaranteed coming and you know that, you can pay by PayPal. All you got to do is email me. I'll send you the PayPal email address. All right. What's up, buddy? You all right? Where you going? You going to bed already? All right. Right. So yeah, right when you arrive, that can be taken care of. All right. So that's what we got going on for the 2 days. And in addition to that, the email address, which is in the description box. Also for a spiritual consultation or a reading, you can contact me. I ask you to give me 2 days in advance. Pretty much in sync right now. I'm about a day to 2 days out. Specify in the email, please, which one you want. As I said before in the past, and I'll say it again and again, there is a difference between a spiritual reading or a consultation. All right. Reading is, using a system of divination to contact the spirits, whereas a consultation is more of a free-for-all. You can pretty much dictate how that goes. You could ask whatever questions you want. You can focus on a specific area. That's entirely up to you. People use it for a multitude of means. And as you know, those that I've worked with in the past, I'm not one of those people that need to, I'm not knocking anybody that does. I don't need to put, what do they call that shit on your website? Testimonials and all that, because I don't believe in that. I think that can be manipulated and bullshit. I just tell people, experience it for yourself. The work speaks for itself. That's how I operate. I don't deal with none of that staged bullshit or putting any of that nonsense up or trying to persuade your opinion. The work speaks for itself. That's just how I operate. So anyway, for any of those things, you can email me at the email in the description box, khnum19@gmail.com. All right, so let's get into what I want to really get into tonight. I haven't gotten all the preliminaries out of the way. Oh, and again, if you didn't get the flyer for the event, sorry, you could email me at that same email address. We'll give you the flyer. All the information I described is on the flyer, has the dates, the times. You do need to request an invite and let us know you're coming. So you do need to contact us so we can briefly talk to you. Don't want nobody there's no address on the flyer. So if you've never come before, you wouldn't know where to go anyway. But yeah, you do need to contact us so we can briefly speak with you and go from there. So again, same email address. All right. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, you see the name of the title. This is important because this deals and filters down into every aspect of this path. You've heard me mention this a lot over the last couple of months, I'm going to say. You've heard me throw it in a lot here and there. It really is a key piece to being successful on this path. Critical thinking equals self-empowerment. We're going to talk in different areas, aspects of this, how it affects working on this path, dealing with your subjective and objective. The reason why I went over what I went over last week was kind of lead us to this point this week, to understanding, to really working with your objective and your subjective universes, or objective and subjective consciousness, is being able to be a critical thinker. All right. Now, where people get stuck. All right. And I'm gonna quote and use a few statements. I'm gonna take some stuff out of the Mind Star, some of my own personal thoughts. I'm gonna continue to take a few excerpts out of there in a moment. Not going to get into too much stuff in books tonight. I'm kind of just going to really just flow with it this evening. Where people struggle, and the reason why prior to these last couple of weeks I did a series on Luciferianism is because Luciferianism really gives you the mindset of how you need to approach and being a critical thinker. A lot of people don't understand where they struggle. A lot of their outlook on life is subjective. All right. What do I mean by that? Now, I know I always pay close attention when I'm doing certain things as far as the classes and the line of questioning that we get in the videos and the classes. Some people still approach things theistic, theistic or theory purpose, or whether you want to call it, when we say theory or theistic, whether I don't like to use the word worship, but where they have to look at something as an external being, in this case being Lucifer, dealing with Luciferianism when we were talking about. Now, it made it clear, it goes to show you where people struggle. It can be whatever you want it to be, okay? And when I say it can be whatever you want it to be, that simply means is we got to be able to decipher what we're projecting is subjective as opposed to objective. And this is where I think the struggle comes in, because when people approach magic, working rituals, or even the concept of deity / archetypes, regardless of whatever culture it is or system, be it, the Orishi, be it the Natiru of ancient Egypt, be it the Babylonian or Sumerian magic or deity, whatever system, it doesn't matter what it is. How you approach it is reason why I went over last week. How you approach it is what you grasped from your subjective, and all those influences that you gathered from the moment you were birthed physically into the world is shaping your subjective universe, because it's gonna give you your perception and your outlook on things. Okay, so we need to understand this, because when we simply say it is whatever you want it to be, that's literally what it is, and you can't compare literally what you want it to be to maybe the next person. But each individual still has the right to be, adverse, or doesn't have to 100% agree with it. But here's a couple of things I want to throw real quick. All right. A few quotes that I had marked. All right. There's something, and you can find this, I believe, in his Liber 777. This is a quote from Aleister Crowley. All right. Pay attention to this quote, because it's very important. The whole sole object of all true magical and mystical training, pay attention to this now, is to become free from every kind of limitation. I want to say that again. This is the first part of the statement. The whole sole object of all true magical and mystical training is to become free from every kind of limitation. Thus, body and mind, in the widest sense, are the obstacles in the path of the wise. Okay? So this basically is clearly stating, okay, the body and the mind, in the widest sense, are your obstacle. But I want to focus on the mind, okay? Because in this statement, in this little 4-line statement, there's a lot of of information. If you apply it, you will be able to understand what this is really all about. The limitation part. All right. So let's start from the back. Again, I want to analyze and break this short statement apart real quick. Okay. How does one become free of every kind of limitation? Right. Well, first and foremost, we have to use basic common sense. Now, unfortunately, as I've said before in the past, not everybody has basic common sense. You can't teach that. You either have it or you don't. When we say a limitation, first, the process the individual has to utilize, and again, this is all part of critical thinking, because this is how an adept on this path of self-mastery, applies the work and is able to come up with this personal system of self-mastery for themselves. All right. You got to first look and analyze yourself and say, what is it that is limiting you or holding you back? Is it a certain habit? Is it a certain thing that you do that you struggle with, be it money, be it relationships? Is it a horrible temper that you may have, a bad attitude? I'm just throwing some quick examples out there. What limitations are holding you back? When you take it a little more deeper and dealing with your subjective, are you still looking at things from a faith-based perspective? And Crowley really was talking about in this statement, more or less so that, okay? The mind still, one thing we have to understand on this path, regardless of how long you've been studying, it's pretty much pointless if you're studying all these different things, your Luciferianism, vampirism, or whatever it might be, okay? It's pointless if you're studying all those things and you don't know how to apply them. And the only way you're going to be able to apply them successfully is being a critical thinker. Part of that process is understanding what limitations are holding you back. So in this sense, Crowley was talking about the mind and how a lot of spiritual things and how they are perceived are still limiting the individual to understanding, quote unquote, how great they can be, how successful they can be on this path. But those limitations will keep an individual or hold an individual back. What does that mean? Again, I've seen this, whether people are conscious of it or not. They still come on this path with older philosophies and systems that they previously came from and not really knowing it. How do you know that? Well, if you observe, and remember, you hear a term used in spiritual, the observers, the watchers. We all should be observers and watchers to some degree. And I'm an observer of people. I'm an observer of people's behavior, not just amongst people on this path. I can get a lot of just walking through the supermarket and watching people's mannerisms and the way they behave and the way they act tells a lot about the person. You can even see what they're going through. You can even see what personal traumas that they might be dealing with or what issues are going on in their life just by the way they walk, by their facial expressions, by the way they grab things, the way they move. This is a fact. This is a reality. And if you train yourself, and not only that, if you're able to zone in on them correctly, you can kind of feel their vibration and their energy, which emanates from those reactions, the way they walk. When somebody is, one thing I'm always, conscious of is when you're talking to somebody, watch their eyes and their movement of their eyes. And this is a lot of things people learn per se in law enforcement. When you're interviewing somebody, and I watch this with my clients, when somebody's talking to you and they can only look down or up or their eyes keep fluttering left to right, that's a very insecure individual that's struggling with some internal issues, okay? When a person can't look at you eye to eye, it doesn't mean that, I want to make this clear, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them or they're a bad person. It's shown. This is why you hear the saying, the eyes or the tunnel to the soul, right? Well, you can tell a lot about an individual by looking in their eyes. And not just so much looking in their eyes, but also watching how their eyes react. Individual that can't engage you head on and is looking to the left and the right, up and down, they're dealing with a lot of personal insecurities that can come from a multitude of different traumas. It could be physical abuse. It could be verbal abuse. It could be insecurity in their looks. How they feel about themselves. It could be double R. I'm sorry, I just saw your comment. I did get your email. I saw it right before I came on. I will respond back to you as soon as I get off. All right. I did not forget about you. I'm glad that you popped up. So look for that when I get off. When you are an observer, a critical observer, and you really know how to observe. Like I say, I can go into, it could be a mall, it could be a supermarket. I can watch a male or a female just by the way they walk, their mannerisms, how their shoulders are when they walk. Are they looking down or up? When an individual has slumped shoulders and is constantly looking down, they're a defeated person. They're a very insecure person. When you're talking with somebody and engaging somebody and they can't look at you in the eyes, again, they're dealing with a lot of personal insecurities. When you watch the way people move and how their movements are, whether lively or unlively, also determines certain things that they're going through. This is something very easily to discipline yourself in, especially if you practice real vampirism. You're able to tell. And facial expressions and mannerisms, especially with females, is very critical in understanding, certain things that an individual might be going through. So what Crowley is saying here, understand your limitations. That's part of it. What are your weaknesses or insecurities about yourself? Number one, how do you approach this path? Now, having said this, when I said before, just a minute or two ago, people will come on this path taking previous systems that they came from. That's kind of a problem because when you do, and you carry that over, it kind of holds you back and limits you. What do I mean by that? All right. You'll have people take on a whole different approach with the same old methodology. It doesn't work. Trust me when I tell you. You one part of linking in or connecting to the isolated consciousness is separating yourself from that way of thinking, that methodology. It's now, again, for somebody newer first coming on the path, it's not going to happen right away. And you'll find that for individuals that have been on the path for a while, it'll tend to resurface from time to time, whether you're conscious of it or not. Because remember, this system of mental indoctrination, or which I like to call mental slavery, remember, this is something that started at birth. 99, I'm sure most of us came out of the womb, not on this path. I don't care if you didn't come up in a religious household, you were still reflected by religion, because we all grew up in a society, quote unquote, that is influenced by religious theology in some shape, form, or fashion. Most of us did come up through some type of religious system, some form of Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, some form of monotheism. That, coupled with how we're programmed 24/7 through society, media, etc., that's not something that goes away overnight. Most people, I love the people that think they're completely over it. Your conspiracy theories people, your people that are the people that got to constantly talk about conspiracy theories are the people that are not over the shit, that got to struggle with it. They just don't realize it. The reason why we don't really fuck with that or waste our time on this path with any of that nonsense, because when you're wasting more time and energy talking about the problem and not devoting enough time and energy to fixing the problem, that becomes a problem in itself. And nobody wants to address that. So the problem that I have, quote unquote, with a lot of these so-called conscious circles nowadays, they basically become, what I call ego stroking sessions, where individuals just sit back and talk about what the problem is, what the devil did to them. And my first and foremost to get mad, I say, well, then you're still kind of religious. So, when you're saying what the devil or the white man or whatever your concept of the devil is, you need to explain that, who and what is that? And then what slowly happens, long story short, be it God or devil, we're back to religious theology. You understand? That is what Crowley was talking about, is a limitation on this path, because it affects you, not just because you might say on the surface, I'm not religious, but the impact or the trauma from that indoctrination over the years, from the time you were, birthed out of your mother's womb to the present, is something that takes time, discipline, and most importantly, critical thinking to overcome and master. Because I've watched over the years in doing this for many years. I've watched over the years where people tend to bring some of that old shit with them in this path. They get frustrated, it doesn't work out, and then they go back to doing the same shit that they were doing prior to coming over here. And I want to make this clear. I've said this many times over the last several years. Okay, this is not for everybody. I made that clear. This is not a path for everybody. You'll know that by just experiencing it. And it's okay. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Okay, one thing we truly understand on this path, one, it's not like any other religious dogma. We're not trying to convert nobody. I want to make that clear. Nobody on this path's goal is to go out and convert somebody. See, in a lot of the systems we belong prior to this path, we would try to go out and convert people to our way of thinking, our quote unquote, our way of life. I don't care if you were a Muslim, Kemetic, Ifa. We always went out with this egotistical, arrogant mindset. I'm going to convert this person over to my way of thinking. And I have the absolute truth. And anything outside of what I'm saying is not true. That's some arrogant ass bullshit. And that's a limitation in itself. So if you think you're going to come on this path and you think your mentality, your way of thinking is the only correct way, and anybody that is not in line or in sync with that or is adverse to that, okay, pay attention to that word, is adverse to that, is wrong, then you're going to struggle on this path. That, whether you're conscious of it or not, that is a religious mindset. I say that to say is we do not go out, we do not seek to convert anybody on this path. That is never my intention. Doing these classes is not for the purpose of gathering followers. I don't want no followers, because followers are do people. We want stand-up character, leader type people that are going to do for themselves. So we're not interested in converting people and getting followers, because that's not going to help the goal that we're trying to achieve. What is that? Self-mastery. Because it starts with self. The problem is all these other groups are trying to collectively gather you before self is right. So we understand it's reverse. You must get yourself in order Because when we're all in order and we've laid out our own system that works for us, quote unquote, we got our shit together, we're automatically just going to all come together. Because once our shit is together, then we can start branching out outside of ourselves. So this path attacks getting your shit together first. You know that old adage, you can't help somebody if you can't help yourself. See, just because you join an organization and you think it's masked your insecurities and your failures, that's not going to fix them. You can come into, say you're super spiritually comedic and you're into all this Egyptian studies and mysteries, but you're piss broke, you ain't got your shit together, your life is in shambles. Just because you made some declaration and joined some group organization or made some declaration, that doesn't mean it's going to change your personal shit. That still is going to exist. You're still going to have money problems, family problems, personal issues. That's not going to go away because you try to mask it with some type of dogma. Whereas this path says, okay, you want to come on this path? You want to make the intention to be on this path? Well, boom, here's what we got to do. Step one. Let's deal with your bullshit and your limitations and what's holding you back. Critical thinking. See, this is not just about I'm going to join something, get the membership card, make the statement, put on the attire, and now I'm a full-fledged member. That's not what this is about. This is about seriously doing work. So I want to take another excerpt, okay? So that statement there, what Crowley was basically trying to say is know your limitations and how they're holding you back. That's something everybody should do. That's something everybody should take stock of when they're doing work, okay? There was a statement from the Luciferian book that I was going through a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to revisit, The Enlightened Luciferian, all right? Listen to this, because this in a nutshell also kind of explains critical thinking, how an individual should approach it. Because again, when using critical thinking, it equals self-empowerment. That's exactly why I titled this video that. It's that simple. This isn't just about lighting some candles, putting on your black cloak or your black robe, which that's a part of it, but it's not the only part of it. This is being able to utilize critical thinking and problem-solving skills at all times in your life. Magic is about, that's when we say working magic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't just start and end in the chamber or the altar room. Okay, that enhances your magical experience, your magical journey. It starts from the moment you set your feet on the floor in your bedroom and rise from the time you brush your teeth, wash your ass, get in the shower, and head out the door. It starts, well, you should do something before you head out the door, but you get my point. It's a constant connection to this energy via critical thinking. All right, I want you to listen to this real quick. This is the author now, and I'm going to just go into a short excerpt, and he makes it clear in here that not to accept his viewpoints only, because that would be ridiculous. Because he also taps into here that, remember, all a teacher, an author, or individual that puts information out or writes book can do is give you the experience from their subjective. But most people don't understand that it's coming from their personal experiences via their subjective. When somebody tries to pass on a dogma or information as it being the exclusive of all exclusiveness, it becomes a problem. Okay, this is how religious groups starts. This is how fanatics are born. Because when somebody lays claim, be it any of these nutcases individually or these groups that, stay away from all the groups that have one supreme leader over it. Them days are over. The days of the conscious pimp is over. Come on. I mean, we're in 2018. If you're still down with that conscious pimp shit, then that's your stupidity. You deserve to be taken advantage of. If you believe one clown, he or she's got the key to your salvation, you're a complete bumbling idiot. And you're basically setting yourself up as a target. You're going to be used and abused and tossed to the wayside. Because any groups, organizations, or people like that, they have an agenda. And that agenda usually is to suck you dry financially, number one. Number two, they usually probably have some sexual agenda. It's there. It's just a matter of it coming to the surface, etc. The Catholic Church, I mean, I say anymore. That's a whole nother story. All right. I hope that those who have an interest in pursuing the ideals, in this case of Luciferianism, take the time to read many books and not adopt a single philosophy, being versatile. So I don't care if you're reading books on vampirism. I don't care if you're reading books on, Luciferianism, whatever it may be. Don't take or adopt one particular philosophy, all right? In the nature of my conceived version of Luciferianism, please be open into accepting the broader spectrum of Luciferianism. To start with, and to correct a misunderstanding which is being propagated, the broader definition of Luciferianism does not require the denial of the existence of a supreme power. This is why I wanted to point that out. Some people that still need that external focus, if you're going to look at the archetypes as a deity, as a supreme power, supreme being, that's your personal choice. Now, I per se don't, but that's the unique thing about this path. We get that everybody's going to have a different perspective. So I wanted to point that out because I noticed there's some people that still struggle. For an example, what do I mean by that? If you're working with Lucifer, if you're working with Kali, if you're working with whatever deity or archetype, if you need to externalize and visualize an image of that particular deity or archetype to focus in some form of reverence, that's entirely up to you. Just because I may not agree with it or somebody else, if that works for you, if you're getting results, then that's what you do. Don't see where you ruin that is. Don't ask the question, should or should I not? Okay, that's irrelevant. If that's where your road is leading to you and it's working, then you should. Okay, so I wanted to point that out because I still see, no matter what system we talk about, where we go, I still see some people struggling with that. It constantly comes up off and on. So this would be a good measure to address that. All right. So no, you don't have to deny that. If you believe in, by way of your, and it is subjective, as long as you understand that, if you need to focus on some supreme power, and again, I will speak for myself, I don't do that because my perception, let's say on the Luciferianism or the path of self-mastery or dealing with any of these left-hand path practices, it's about that self-mastery. And I go with the concept, it starts with self. All these things reside within. You just got to know how to activate them. That's the way I approach it. Must you do it like that? Absolutely not. And this is important to understand. All right, so let me continue. It merely requires that you carefully consider who that supreme power is and what constitutes its reality, a God. So that's the difference. If you still need to use that aspect of it, make sure you understand who this supreme power is and to you what constituted being, quote unquote, a God or a deity. All right. Naive anti-Christian dogma bears the same chains of thought as pro-Christian dogma. Your instinctive rejection of all things related to Judeo-Christian history restricts your objectivity in the same way a born-again Christian rejects entertaining your subjective philosophies, right? Resulting in a barrier that obstructs the intercourse of a better humanity being created by both sides. Does God have to be defined as having the attributes that modern Christianity dictates he has? I would say not. This book is intentionally swaying towards theistic principles as it is my current point of view. Now, here's something important I want to get into. Left-hand path aspect. This is what I found interesting in this book. There is a certain concept of Luciferianism on the left-hand path. And this is why you heard me say over the weeks, not to get too caught up in using that term all the time, because the left-hand path aspect of Luciferianism in itself is not the sole or authenticated aspect of Luciferianism. Because somebody that's on the left-hand path that practices Luciferianism is going to give you their definition of it. Meaning you're going to find in left-hand path aspects of Luciferianism, they're going to say, no, you can't look at Lucifer as a literal deity. And I'm in agreement with that. But true Luciferianism states you can look at it as ever you want. So what I'm saying is you got to be careful not getting caught up in using that statement, because sometimes that not being aware kind of puts you in that, religious frame of mind, and you're not even conscious of it. Because, and I'm going to explain. So the author gets into it. And I thought this was a great point, because sometimes, quote unquote, for individuals on left-hand path, they will present it as the tell-all themselves. Like, this is the only way you can approach Luciferianism, or this is the only way you can approach vampirism. Because there's people that practice, let's say, vampirism that, quote unquote, may not fully identify with what we know as left-hand path, but they have their own methodology of applying it. Is that right or wrong? It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's how the individual is perceiving it by way of their subjective experiences. All right, so listen to this. I would also hope that in the nature of you being the abstract objectivist that I employed you to be earlier, that equally left-hand path and atheistic Luciferians will take this book on board in their gathering of ultimate illumination and their personal goal of apotheosis, which is self-deity or self-deification. Similarly, I aim on writing to take a board of my internal atheistic nature of the moment, which is suspended in preference to this holistic theistic version of my current incarnation. Maybe this will change, as I hope the sharing of information contained within this allows you to accept the potential for a change. A stubborn and unchangeable conviction before consideration is not the nature of a Luciferian. And in that much, I define my dogmatic belief of what makes a Luciferian. Let us expand upon the question, who is God? I find that in most cases, generic theistic and atheistic ideals will allow for a case of self-deification. This is not to say that all Luciferians don't believe that they are God, which has dominion over all he sees. In fact, wherein when those who are not Luciferians hear this claim, right? We believe we are gods. They rush to the conclusion that they believe there's some universal or spook spiritual religious God. That's not what we mean. Well, that's not what it means. Long story short, I'm going to kind of stop there. I'm not going to get into all this. I wanted to point out what the author makes unique here. Even those on the left-hand path can tend to have tunnel vision, okay? As their concept of Luciferianism is, the only or the correct way. That's wrong in itself. Again, the reason why I did that series a few weeks back on Luciferianism is because it embodies critical thinking. True Luciferianism embodies that critical thinking. All right. So you must approach it from that mindset. You must understand your limitations. You must also take into account and take stock of what it is you might understand or not understand, what it is you quote unquote personally agree and disagree with, but understand why you may not agree or disagree with. And more importantly, being able to move forward from that, because you're under an illusion if you think that you're going to find some dogma, some doctrine, or some information that's going to line up perfectly with everything, the way you think and how you feel, and that it's going to be perfect when it comes to that. That's a bunch of bullshit. And that's why structured religions, dogmas, and belief systems don't work. They don't work because an individual who, by nature is, a god or a goddess or is tapped into that isolated consciousness is going to eventually evolve out of that mentality, that way of thinking. And this is why a lot of us don't stay in those restricted dogmas, philosophies, and spiritual systems, because after we get out of it, what we feel like we got out of it, and then we get to the point where we feel like there's no more I can get out of this shit, we start looking for something else. You understand? We start looking for something else because the constant thirst to grow on this path is never ending. You're never content. You're never satisfied. You're constantly seeking knowledge. You're constantly seeking enlightenment. That's the whole purpose. And this is why a lot of us outgrow a lot of spiritual systems and go through changes. Okay. Now, the beauty of this path of self-mastery, you can incorporate, as I said, I believe it was last week or the week before, you can incorporate whatever aspect of spirituality you want on this path and make it work for you. I don't care if it's Native American or shamanism. I don't care if it's Luciferianism, vampirism, if it's Ifa, if it's Palo, if it's voodoo hoodoo, it doesn't matter. Because once you get out of your mind the limitation of, is this the right way to do it? First of all, understanding tradition and its place when working a lot of these systems. If you're caught up in the traditional aspect of it, that's going to be a limitation in itself. Because a lot of the tradition was done for the purpose of power and control, just like religion. Religion has a lot of traditions incorporated. If you technically, for an example, if you look at Catholicism, right? And I'm saying this for somebody that was born and raised Catholic, right? Somebody that went to Catholic school for 8 years, so I can speak from experience. Catholicism is based on a lot of traditions that have nothing to do with the Bible. A lot of the stuff that's done in the rituals of the Catholic Church, be it the Mass and many of the other sacraments and other rituals they do, you can't find a lick of them in the Bible. And it's funny how a lot of Catholics don't even question that, because you can't find word verbatim other than the excerpts of a few words Jesus spoke at the Last Supper and the Mass. Where did they get the rest of it from, right? Where did they get the exact rituals of confirmation, right? Communion. These are traditions that they came up with later. And I can understand why a lot of, mainstream Christians broke off later after the fact. Not that I'm condoning Christianity, but I get it. But my whole point is, when you get stuck in tradition, I'm using something that the masses can relate to. If you're going to approach this path and worry according to quote unquote man-made tradition, if you're doing it right or wrong, that's going to be a problem in itself. All right. So understanding your limitations is critical on this path to being quote unquote a critical thinker. The last section I had prepared that I want to get into, and then I'll go into the chat, take your questions and your comments. This is the excerpt I have prepared from Mindstar by Dr. Michael Aquino, and I'd recommend you get this book, Mindstar, if you don't have it. It's the second edition, so revision. It's great because this really approaches magic for that critical problem-solving type of thinker. If you're not that person, I'm telling you, you're going to struggle on this path. Trust me when I tell you. You're going to find out, oh, this is a little more deeper than lighting candles and creating altars and putting on my black cloak. And believe me, as I said before, that is part of it. And I love to do that stuff. Those that know that work with me know I'm a big individual on dealing with imagery for rituals. And when you come to the rituals, or if you've worked with me over the years, you know this. Okay, so I'm not downplaying that. I've referred to it numerous times, but I want you to see the flip side, because you always hear in many of the videos over the years, it's about doing the work, doing the work. What is doing the work? The difference with us and everybody else is we're not, they'll say, don't talk about it, be about it. Well, that's us. We don't just sit around in circles and talk about how great we used to be back in the day and how, back in ancient Egypt, we were this, back in the day, this. I told you, a lot of conscious people in conscious circles have what we call back in the day itis. We don't have that on this path. You understand? Back in the day itis are those individuals that utilize or find an excuse or a reason of why they're failing now in their life, and then they justify it of how great they used to be back in the day, and then they focus or shift that blame onto some external force, be it the white man or society or the government or whatever it might be. This usually creates a certain mindset. This is not an individual that is going to evolve into being a critical thinker. Because as I said at the beginning of the video, most people spend time and energy talking about the problem, too much time and energy, but there's never enough of time and energy for solutions to the problem. Well, I think in 2018, we know what the problems are. We see what the problems are with government. We see racism is real. All right. We see economics is transitioning and going through a serious change. There is no more middle class. You either got money or you don't. Most of us can reflect when we grew up, there was a such thing as middle class. And I considered myself lower middle class when we were raised. Now, yeah, we had a little bit of the government assistance, the food stamps. I wouldn't say it was, project type of, struggle. I would say it was above that. But you had what you called regular middle class. Middle class don't exist no more. You either got money or you don't. They say that the average person is 1 or 2 paychecks away from being on the street homeless, right? We know this. This is a reality. We see these problems, right? Racism is real. Anybody that tells you racism doesn't exist is a complete fucking fool, okay? But we don't let these circumstances define us, right? We could see what's going on with nature, right? We understand the macro and the microcosm. We see, because of us as individuals, by the fucked up energy we put out there, we see the planet rebelling. Remember, the planet is a living entity, right? We know this basic knowledge. We are living entities. When we get sick, what happens when we get a virus or an infection? We build up with mucus, we get sick, the body's got to purify itself. Well, planet Earth is doing the same thing. You're seeing all these severe cataclysmic hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes is because we're looking for some spooky shit. Then you hear people say dumb shit like, this is God, and we're in the last days. Well, the God that's creating this shit is us, okay? See, we don't want to take responsibility for it. This all started from when we started creating factories and poisoning the atmosphere, et cetera. All right, and I don't want to get into all that shit because then we start getting into all that complaining. I'm bringing this up in a nutshell to say we understand this. Now the question is, having said all that without getting into it too much and ranting and raving and carrying on like everybody else will, what are you doing to correct that situation? All right, well, here's how this works. Step 1 starts with yourself.
The problem is you're given the illusion that you must expand out to everything and everybody else before you start with you. That's completely false. First and foremost, you must get your shit together. Remember, what's the first principle of an adept that works black magic? You must first master yourself and your immediate surroundings environment, meaning your family, your immediate surroundings environment. Doesn't mean that things going on in the world don't affect you to a certain degree, but when you master and get those things in order, they do not affect you on the level that it affects the common person. There's people every day that are emotionally aroused by the bullshit that goes on in the news, and that's done intentionally. Police shootings, all these protests, all the shit that you see in the news, the weak individual that is affected by it on a daily basis is an individual that is not in control of themselves. And it's not that this stuff is new. It appears to be new, right? You think it's something new. You think it's increased. It really hasn't. It's only creates the illusion it has because remember, 15, 20, 25 years ago, you didn't have all this social media. You didn't have Facebook and YouTube and cameras everywhere where when things happen, it's uploaded in real time. And immediately after it happens, you get access to it. So it creates this illusion that, man, things are even 50 times worse now than they were back then. You think police brutality has changed from now since, say, the 70s? You're completely fucking stupid if you think that. It's just they didn't film everything that took place. I can attest to, from growing up in my experiences, nothing has changed, okay? You're seeing it more because it's easier, to upload it in real time. Why is that done? That's done intentionally for a specific purpose to feed off of your emotions and instill fear in you, right? Then you get fools that get together and they want to, let's protest. We're gonna go out and take to the streets. You're playing right into their hands. That'll give them a reason to bring in martial law and attack you. You can't go to a gunfight with a butter knife. So how do we attack this? It starts first. Remember, no great nation ever went to war without invoking something spiritual first. The problem is we don't look within ourselves and attack this internally before we attack it externally. So that's the difference between a critical thinker and somebody who's proactive as opposed to somebody who's just completely reactive off of their raw emotions. This is an individual that's going to fail. Because if you're just a reactionary individual, you have no control over your emotions, and you just react to every situation, you get mad for every reason, or you can't critical think your way out of any situation, you're going to be somebody that's going to be easily taken advantage of. So that shit that you're seeing on the news, constantly propagated through the media, that's for individuals that have weak minds. Like, I get people that send me emails about this shit. And if you watch my channel, I'm not into that shit. I don't really deal with that. I mean, years ago I did. I would address it. I'm going back over 20-something years ago. I don't deal with that no more because it's a waste of time and energy. Because I'm not really interested, I'm aware, I want to make that clear, but I'm not interested of this whole Donald Trump, this and that. Because bottom line, at the end of the day, it doesn't affect me like that. Doesn't mean I'm not aware of what's going on. I need to be aware so it shows me which way I need to move and what I need to do to be proactive. You understand? This is the whole purpose of this path, is to be proactive, not reactive. Now, it doesn't mean, there is a time when you got to just automatically react. I'm not saying be no punk or be soft, but you're supposed to know the time for that. I want to make that clear. All right. So what I want to get into, I didn't finish last week with collective subjective universes. I have a little excerpt for that, and then I'll go to the chat, take your questions and your comments, because this is going to help you understand critical thinking. Remember, and if this is something you got to write down, put it on your altar, stick it somewhere where you can see it, where you constantly look at it. It reminds you, critical thinking equals self-empowerment. It's that simple. Critical. What does the word critical mean? To be a critical thinker, you must analyze, break apart. Chop up, mass. Really do your due diligence before you come to the conclusion on something. A critical thinker just doesn't accept anything for face value. A critical thinker is not a conformist. We don't do shit because everybody else is doing it. We couldn't care if everybody's gathering or everybody now, like I said, a big thing seems nowadays, the last 10 plus years, is to let's identify with Egypt in some shape, form, or fashion. Let me put on a big ass Egyptian ankh, or let me put on some African type of clothing, and that's going to mask my insecurities and that's going to cover up all of my shortcomings. Because I say Hotep and I study and read books on Egypt, my problems are solved. Absolutely fucking not. That is not true. Problem is, it's become trendy. We don't do things because everybody else is doing them. We don't do things because maybe somebody else just may not understand it. So we're not going to be scared and shy away from having our own perspective, our own opinion or outlook on something. Then you have to be careful of what I call the people that are a slave to books, right? As I said before, don't let the books that you read control you. You need to be the controller of the books you read. Meaning you have these other people that deal with this pseudo and non-pseudo shit. Well, not taking into account that they don't understand how the subjective and the objective universes work. They think they focus too much on the objective, and if they can't find it in some book who they have authenticated it. Now, remember, you have the word authenticate, which has root in the word author and has root in the word authoritative. Just because somebody authors a book doesn't make them the authority on it. Let's make that clear. It just means they're giving you their opinions and their experiences on the subject that they might be writing on. And that's why I like what the author said in the previous excerpt. Don't take what he's saying as the tell-all. You should never adopt to one philosophy, one system, or one way of thinking. You should read on whatever topic you study. You should read a vast level or different types of books so you have a vast, well-rounded opinion on it. Most people don't do that in a lot of conscious circles. They become what I call exclusive to Mickey Mouse clubs and groups. That becomes a problem, okay? That becomes a serious problem in the sense you start to take the I'm right complex and everybody else is wrong. You understand? So this is important because if you can't take that mentality or you don't know how to put it into perspective, you struggle. So let's talk a little bit real quick. The last section, collective subjective universes, right? You're going to find that this is what shapes an individual's personality, the way they think. And I always observe this with people that come on this path. Remember I said earlier, you can observe people. Here's a ritual you can do, real simple. What I mentioned earlier, do this one day. Just go to a mall, go to a supermarket, and just walk around and observe people. Here's what I mean. Watch their facial expressions. Watch their body language. Again, pay attention to their shoulders and how they walk. Watch if their shoulders are slumped forward, their head is down. Watch how they react and interact, whether it's with things that they're shopping for with other people. Watch how they communicate, eye contact. By all those behaviors and mannerisms, you can tell, again, what an individual is going through, what traumas they're suffering from, if they're dealing with insecurities, loneliness, failures in their life. All of that can be read by just being an observer. This is part of critical thinking. You understand? Not passing judgment. I want to make that clear. We're not saying from a judgmental sense because you think. Being a critical thinker means really analyze a person. You can even look at the person that's phony. What do I mean by the person that's phony? There's the one that's too overly happy and joyous. And that's usually a cover for insecurity. You've seen these motherfuckers all the time. They're just too fucking peppy and everything is they're perky and, hey, how are you? That's also a mask and a window that they're putting up. This is a reality. You understand? This is real. So you need to also, when we say be an observer, is part of what we call critical thinking. All right. So let's talk a little bit about that collective subjective universes, right? Real quick. When more than one SU is present, SU being subjective universe, I'm going to use the short term, is present and involved in any society or problem situation, it should be obvious that no two of them will coincide, both in terms of subconscious reality perception and conscious values, desires, and actions applied. Hence, both human society and human history is most accurately understood as attempts by the involved humans to reconcile, listen to this, their conflicting subjective universes into one or more community-approved collective SUs. Sometimes this is possible through peaceful means such as education, reasoning, or argument. In other instances where conscious SUs are too passionate, or when subconscious SUs are too inflexible and intolerant, the individuals or groups may resort to coercion, aggressive and intensive indoctrination. We call this cognitive dissonance, right? How many motherfuckers do you know suffer from cognitive dissonance? How many motherfuckers do you know are groups, right? When you come across an organization or a group, They suffer from cognitive dissonance. Soon as you bring some shit to them that is not in line with their dogma or doctrine, they resort to this aggression, this aggressive attacking and intensive, and then to their followers, they enforce an intensive indoctrination. How many of us know people like this, right? It could be the average NOI brother that you encounter, the average Nwapian brother or sister that you encounter. Soon as you say something in difference to their leader or one of their books, they get offended, right? Because they can't, as it says here, dealing with the collective and subjective universes, they can't phantom the reality of that fine line of where one begins and the other starts. Do you understand this? And then in relation to maybe something you said to them, a statement you made, they can't put it into perspective. So the automatic way to respond is to be reactionary. They get aggressive, right? They get defensive, right? They take it personal. You're attacking me, right? We've all experienced, it could be a religious person. It could be a Christian. It could be a Orthodox Muslim that gets offended because you're questioning his ideology, right? This is because when you're dealing with collective subjective universes, right? Because they're given a subjective universe on the theory of who and what God is, right? All of those groups have some type of subjective perspective on what the creator is. I don't give a fuck if you are Nation of Islam, 5%er. I don't care what it is you lay claim to. Even on this path, we all look at deity a certain way based on our subjective experiences, right? And as I said before, remember, is it mandatory? And this is why real Luciferianism embodies critical thinking. And you got to be careful because you will have people on the left-hand path say that their methodology of Luciferianism is the correct way. That's not correct itself. Real Luciferianism, if you still feel the need where you need to invoke some external deity, as you read earlier from the first excerpt, if that's, now I per se don't agree with that, as I said before, that's not how I approach it. But if you're an individual that needs to focus on Lucifer or Kali or whoever it may be, you need some type of visual. If that's what you need to do and it works for you, so be it. But if myself, who doesn't approach it like that, or anybody else has a totally different perspective on it, that's fine too. That's the way a critical thinker approaches this. And that's why, again, as I said earlier, I did that series on Luciferianism because Luciferianism embodies the way of thinking of an individual on this path. So I wouldn't even say when you're approaching the aspect of Luciferianism, and as the author quoted in the book, you got to be careful because even people on the left-hand path will think that their aspect of Luciferianism is the only correct way, and that's not true. And I can tell you that from experience. It just means that that's their perspective on it. Because let me give you an example. The average person that claims to be left-hand path and a Luciferian would never ever look at approaching the aspect of Luciferianism, let's say, as worshiping or invoking an external deity. And I'm in agreement with that. That's my stance on it. Whereas somebody that embodies the totality of Luciferianism understands that there are individuals that might approach it like that. And also recognize the fact, though they don't agree with it, they understand that individual has that right to approach it like that. That's how I approach it. And I brought that up to say because this is something that comes up constantly over and over, where I see people struggling with this concept of deity, this concept of focusing on some type of visual or external thing outside of themselves. So I'm going to put it to you the best way I can. If that's what you need to do and it works for you, do it. But remember what it said in there. Understand the purpose and meaning of what that deity and what constitutes it being a deity to you. As long as you understand that fact, then you approach it however you want. And stop asking, should I or should I not? Is it right or wrong? Because the very fact that you're asking that is giving you the answer to the question, which is you're confused and you still don't understand it. And again, I say approach it. And if it works for you, works for you. Now, that don't mean down the line you may not change your approach, because we've all gone through different experiences on this path where we might have started out approaching something one way, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, we changed the way we approached it. Why? Because we've grown. We now have a different perspective gained by way of our subjective experiences, right? So now we say, no, based on the experiences that I've gathered, I don't approach deity the way I did 15, 20 years ago. I'm trying to get you to see the overall spectrum of being a critical thinker. But now the challenge is not just, all right, it's easy maybe to put yourself in the spectrum, your perspective and where you stand. The harder thing to do is understanding how you're going to relate and connect to others that don't apply it the same way. That's the challenge. So it's easy. That part to me is not the challenging part. Now, how you gonna connect, relate, or work or deal with an individual that may not approach it the same way? That's where the challenge comes in. Well, if you take that perspective, then you will understand. It's being able to understand the point of view that, look, my way is not the only right way. See, if you can say that to yourself, say, I get it. I understand this person is looking at it based on their perspective and how they see it. And I understand my perspective, but I also understand we can agree to disagree. It's that simple. If we take that approach in dealing with people, if we, they say in order for leaders all over the world, be it government, political, religious, to really sit down at a round table and hash out their differences, well, you have to check that way of thinking at the door. All right. So let me finish with this last section, and then we'll go into the chat and through some of the questions. All right. So let me continue. So we talked about when you question a person's ideology, they get aggressive. They resort to, because you've attacked their perspective, and usually you incited some type of emotion in them that you made them think, and it frustrates them. But watch this. Along with the suppression or extermination of the offending competitors to achieve the desired reality, talking about when the individual is attacked. In modern society, unsurprisingly, such coercion and intolerances are invariably attributed to the enemy. Domestic outlaws, insurgents, revolutionaries, or other alien individuals or groups. It is assumed without any need for argument or justification that the community, collective subjective universe into which its members have been conditioned since birth is not just one among many options, but is reality. Questioning it thus goes beyond acceptable curiosity to heresy, treason, or insanity, right? You can't phantom the fact, right? In all these groups and organizations, you're taught if you question that that's a problem, right? You should never question. You're not supposed to ask anything. You shouldn't assume, right? You should never question the so-called sole authority that they have established, right? That's what this happens when you get caught up in somebody that's created a collective or subjective universe. And usually a lot of these groups, organizations, religions, dogmas, that's what they're doing. They're trying to create a collective subjective universe for a group of people. That doesn't work. Do you understand? That does not work. This is what this is talking about. Most people will get caught up in that, because when you get caught up in a group ideology, you're caught up in a collective subjective universe that somebody propagated by way of a certain agenda, right? And usually that collective subjective universe is usually centered around practice, rules and regulations, how to dress, how you should look at deity. Well, I'm just giving you a couple basic examples. When you start to buy into that bullshit, this is what happens. And then it becomes, as it said up there, this intense methodology or system of indoctrination. So there's this intense indoctrination that they put in all their leaders, that the leaders put in all their followers. I'm sorry. So this is what breeds fanatics. So what basically the author is saying here is buying into collective subjective universes doesn't work. It's not going to work. Okay. The only way it works on certain levels is some of those aspects you can connect with based on experience. But when you just accept it and connect with it, it doesn't work. All right. The last section. Okay, last couple sections. Okay. This was most famously caricatured in George Orwell's novel 1984, in which failure to accept the party CSU, not just as the conscious, but at the subconscious reality level, were condemned as the worst of all possible sins, thought crime, correspondingly requiring not just punishment, but curing by destroying the offender's ability to see reality other than the party's CSU. Who does that today more than anything? Okay. What's the name of that group? Oh shit, drawing a fucking blank. This is a perfect example of goddamn, what's that group that Tom Cruise belongs to? I'm drawing a blank. Somebody help me out here. What's the name of that organization that a lot of those entertainers and stars like Tom Cruise belong to? Somebody type it in. I can't think. Church, Scientology. I'm sorry. Thank you. Scientology does that because they have a thing called, and it fucked me up when the Nation of Islam was co-signing them. They have a thing called where they do this mind cleansing thing though. It's called taking. They actually I forgot what they call it. There's this thing where they really get into your mind and try to program you a certain way. Like they wash your mind clear and put a certain way of thinking into it, right? And Scientology is big on that. If you don't accept their ideology, it's very strict, right? That's really what it's talking about. Because, and George Orwell's 1984, as you know, George Orwell has a connection. He's one of the founding fathers of Scientology. If you go do the research on George Orwell. So this is where a lot of that cult mentality, and believe you this, a lot of your modern day cult leaders in the last 20 to 50 years study that methodology and they use it on their followers. Do you understand? Religion does the same thing. You must accept the group's collective subjective ideology on whatever it is. If not, there's punishment. You get kicked out, excommunicated. It doesn't work. I say this to say these are all limitations, right? That hold you back from critical thinking. You cannot be part of any type of dogma group or organization like that that's going to create those limitations and prevent you from being a critical thinker. Because when you're a critical thinker and you think for yourself, you're going to be ostracized for it, especially in a group setting. If you bring up anything in opposition to that, you're going to be ostracized for it. So anyway, long story short, I think you get the point. Now I'm going to scroll up. I would hope this raised some serious questions, because the objective of doing this video, simply for the fact to show you what this path is really about when we say do the work. And it's being a critical thinker 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just in your ritual room, not just at your altar, though that is a strong part of it, but it doesn't start and end in the ritual room or the ritual chamber. It doesn't just start and end there. It's constant from the moment you wake up and get out of bed. As I said before, you should always start your day off with some type of acknowledgement of yourself on this path, whether it's some little type of thing you do at your altar, a brief meditation, I don't care what it is. Same thing with ending your day, all right? It's to get you to understand when we say doing the work, and you've heard me say that in tons of videos over the years, okay? It simply means it's a constant process. It's not something that you just do here and there. I mean, I could be watching TV and I'm still, doing something within here, that has something connected to what I'm doing on the path to self-mastery, all right? So let me scroll up. Again, I'm going to skip personal comments and things between yourselves for the sake of time. If you haven't typed questions in, now would be the time to get some questions in or comments pertinent to the subject. Again, I'm not going to really read the comments you guys are talking amongst yourself. I'll skip that for time, just so we could stay on course. Again, peace and greetings. If I didn't greet you personally, peace and greetings to everybody. Again, just a reminder, because I know we have a lot of people here now, just to remind you again, the 2 day of events on the 26th and 27th of this month. We do have a good itinerary put together for both days. I want to reiterate this. We do have a strict timeline we're sticking to, so it's important we start on time so we could get everything in. As I said before, we have several different presenters presenting topics from vampirism to Luciferianism. I know Sister Sonia's doing a feminine perspective on the left-hand path. She's doing something on herbs. We'll have that stuff, different topics. The theme of the event, as I said before, is the journey of a Black Adept. That's the purpose of it. The workshops through the course of the day Friday, which will start between 9 and 10 o'clock. We'll have a meet and greet in the morning because I know there's a couple of people traveling from out of state. We'll have a little coffee and donuts in the morning, little interaction, then we'll get into it. Each presenter will be going about an hour. We'll break for lunch. We'll come back and finish on Friday. At 5, when we're finished, we will again disassemble and meet back in about 3 to 4 hours later. And we will be performing the Luciferian ritual mentioned on the flyer, which is a beautiful ritual. We were actually organizing it and working with it today. Is a beautiful ritual with male and female parts to it. There's something a little different that we haven't done. I ain't going to get into the details. And it's activating the Luciferian energy for each chakra. There's a literal thing for each chakra in a group male and female setting. Now, some of the parts of the ritual, or the chakras that's controlled by feminine energy, the females will be doing it, and the males will be doing some of the other aspect. And then there's a part of it where both do it together. I'm not going to really get into depth with it. There's 4 parts to the ritual. There's 4 different aspects. There'll be 3 different areas set up, and you'll understand it after it's over. We'll finish Friday night with that, and then after that, we will all go out and get a meal. Saturday, we'll be tying it all together at 12:30. That's what the class will be on, that I'll be doing on Saturday, the journey of the Black Adept. It'll be an open discussion with all of us to kind of ask questions on everything we went over, to ask things on new topics, because again, the objective is, and the theme of this event, you will leave this event having a better, broader perspective. You will leave this event, it'll arm you with tools to help you and how you can apply it that's going to best work for you. Not the way we're telling you, but how it's going to work for you. And I think you're going to get a lot out of it. On Saturday, after the class at 12:30 in the afternoon, we'll break up. We'll meet at the beach at 7 p.m. We will be setting up an altar on the beach, and there will be a drumming ritual for the Igun, the Loa, and the Orishi. That'll be about an hour and a half to 2 hours. When that ritual is over, there's a nice restaurant right across the street on the Intercoastal where we'll be eating dinner, and then we finish up at the cemetery after we eat with the final working, Cursed Tablets of the Dead, which is a 2-part ritual. We'll go into that for those that arrive. So the itinerary will be handed out when you arrive on that Friday. All right. That is the purpose of the event. So we do have a goal in mind. We're not just doing it to do it. The goal is for you to understand the journey of a Black Adept, a Black magician, whatever term you want to use, or the individual on this path to self-mastery. Leading up to it, I'm trying to get you to understand and see that, clear your mind of those limitations. There is not one way. Your way is not the right way or the only way. You need to understand that your way works for you. And some of your ways that work for you might be similar with others and may not. And other individuals that have certain things or ways that they carry out that work for them and you don't resonate, you have to be able to understand that too. So I think it's going to give you a broad perspective from different people. Will give you their experiences on this. I'm actually looking into having confirmed, possibly having James Wasserman stop by. And if you know James Wasserman, he is the Grand Master of the OTO Lodge. Actually, he's the Grand Master of my OTO Lodge down here. But he's also the founder of Tahuti Lodge in New York. He's authored a multitude of books. You can Google him. He's been on A&E. He's been on the History Channel. He's what is quote unquote known as an occultist. You've heard me refer to some of his books, especially The Assassins, the Militia of Heaven by James Wasserman. He's put out the Gnostic Mass, which he's actually was responsible for the revision of that. He's got a bunch of books, different books out. You can Google him. I did speak with him actually earlier, and if he's in town, he'd be more than happy to maybe swing by for an hour or so if he's in town. He travels a lot, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, that's what he does. He does lectures and travels all over the world. I think he would add a good flavor to it. He deals a lot with Eastern mysticism, which is something I know a lot of us on this path gravitate to. So I'm hoping we can get him to stop by on Friday at some point if it fits into his schedule, which would be great. And I know he'll bring some books too. He usually, when he not usually, when he comes, he'll have a lot of his publications available, and we will have, as I said before, there will be books and other products available at the event. All right. Anyway, so peace and greetings to everybody. All right, I'm looking for some questions now, something in relation to what we were talking about. Skipping the personal convo between everybody, okay? Okay, I don't see anything yet. Scrolling down. All right, so yeah, I'll actually read this comment. All right, so Gypsy Goddess had typed in about Crowley earlier. Man, that Crowley was brilliant indeed, but definitely went a bit cuckoo. Yeah, he did. He went a little off the deep end. I'm reading a witchcraft book, and they do have some photos of him. Even a younger Crowley, you can see those eyes. But definitely, yeah, Crowley. Now, here's the thing: for those that are ignorant to Crowley, especially when you run into a lot of people, quote unquote, in these conscious groups, you know, first thing they start getting into is all the religious rhetoric. Oh, he's a devil worshiper. And when you hear shit like that, you got to stop somebody and say, well, stop, hold up, brother, hold up, sister. Can you define what is the devil and what is devil worshiping? See, we got to start checking people on shit like this because most of us aren't coming from that perspective. When they saying shit like that, that's that, you know, modern day Satanism that they see on the internet and people practicing. That's not how we're approaching it on this path. And that's not the path or perspective that I'm coming from. I want to make that clear. So when somebody makes an ignorant ass statement like that, you got to stop them in their tracks and ask them, say, well, hold on, brother, sister. When you say that's devil and devil worship, what do you mean when you say that? First, have them define to you who and what the devil is in their words and definition. You're going to find out 99.9% of the time, they're going to give you some religious rhetoric from a religious perspective. Trust me when I tell you. Because when we're talking about Lucifer, even if you're externalizing Lucifer, and that's your prerogative if you are, we're talking about the enlightened one, right? Remember, that story of Lucifer and the 200 fallen angels being cast out of the heavens is symbolic of when you as individuals rose and became aware of your greatness. That's all that story is. Get rid of all that religious rhetoric. It has nothing to do with that fucking good and evil, bad shit. What it really symbolizes when you finally awoke, when you finally said enough of this bullshit. Because when you really look at it in essence, as I said from day one, the individual that was deceptive and lying through those whole biblical stories was your biblical God, because everything he said was a lie. He told them, if you eat of the fruit, you're going to die. Did they die? No. The serpent, right? Lucifer, the devil, whatever religious people want to call him, said, look, he don't want you to eat this shit because you eat it. He knows you'll become like one of them. What happened? They became like one of them. They became aware. They started to understand things they didn't understand prior. So who was really telling the truth and who was really lying? So I say that to say when somebody tells you, and most people will claim when they say the devil and devil worship, they're not religious, then why are you saying that? I hear this comments coming from conscious people that are quote unquote committed conscious. So when you're making that statement, fact check somebody on that. Say, hold up, what do you mean when you say that? Define to me what the devil is to you, because that's subjective in nature. I don't give a fuck what anybody tells you. Because if I asked everybody in this room what the devil is to them, I'm going to get 50 different answers. Okay? And guess what? They're all right to that individual. Just because it may not be right to you, that shit is irrelevant because we're asking a subjective question that's going to have a subjective answer. This is why I went through the collective and subjective universes, because most people answer it having a collective subjective universe based on being influenced by some dogma, doctrine, or ideology. That's why I went through all that stuff, because most people still suffer from a collective subjective universe. They still have bought into some ideology, religion, philosophy, dogma, or doctrine. That's my whole point of going through that shit. So when people say ignorant ass shit like that, especially when it comes to Crowley, now there's a lot of things that I really don't vibe with that Crowley taught because I thought a lot of it was religious in nature, but that's based on my personal experiences. There are some things I do agree with, like the statement that I read earlier. And again, I don't care what system you subscribe to, but let me read it again if you weren't in here earlier. It's a brief 4-page statement, and I think this sums up how you should approach this path, right? The whole soul, this is Crowley now, the whole sole object of all true magical and mystical training is to become free of every kind of limitation. Speaks for itself, right? The body and the mind, in the widest sense, are the obstacles in the path of the wise. I don't care. I think you can apply that to any spiritual system. So stuff like that, I do vibe with and agree with, because in a nutshell, that really explains a lot of people's problems or why they fail or don't succeed on this path. That right there, because of their limitations. One, they don't take a stock and address their limitations. You can call it your bullshit, your shortcomings, your failure, whatever you want to call it. All of those are your limitations. The difference, as I said earlier, with this path and other paths is we address our limitations on this path, things that are holding us back, our issues, our problems, stuff we're not dealing with, right? Whereas other paths teach you to mask it, bury it, and cover it by putting on dashikis and ankhs and saying hotep and putting beads and shit in your hair and wearing your hair now and saying black power and saying hotep. That still ain't going to change the fucked up shit about you. Okay? Don't mean that shit went away just because you're saying black power or hotep or alafia. Your bullshit is still there. And just saying you're dealing with it and not dealing with it, that doesn't make it go away either. Okay? This is the shit why people fail on this path. They don't want to deal with that part. They want to bury themselves in some philosophy or doctrine so they can make themselves feel good. And they think by ignoring their shortcomings and their limitations and their failures, let me just block it out of my mind, toss it to the side, and it's going to go away. Absolutely not. All it does is become stronger, bigger, more intense, more powerful. You could say with more resistance comes persistence, whatever you want to, whatever term you need to use to understand it. And guess what? It will come to the surface, usually at the time you're not expecting it. And then that's where it becomes complicated. And then your critical thinking needs to kick in more than ever. Because when it comes, see, the difference is when that a pep energy rises and comes, the critical thinker can smash it. See, Set, and the ritual is going to show you this on the 26th, because we finish it up with something with Set, which is going to be beautiful. The ritual is going to show you Set was the master critical thinker. You are a representation of Set. And this is why Set was the only individual that was able to control and master a pep. Ra couldn't do it. All the fluffinators love Ra, and they love Heru and Horus. And they were too weak because they were reactionary type of energy. They couldn't combat a pep because a pep fed off of their reaction. That's what a pep feeds off of, is you just being purely reactive. Where Set said, right? When you read the story of how Set controlled the pep, Set said, I understand this shit. I know how I need to approach it. You ain't going to get me to be completely reactive. I'm going to study you. I'm going to observe you. I'm going to see how you move. I'm going to see how you manifest. I'm going to see what you feed off of. Fear is what you feed off of, right? There's an element or a working we do in some groups, it's fear workings. And I'm not going to get into that now, but I talked about that last week, addressing your fears. So Set represents the master critical thinker, because Set was never reactive. But why is Set always demonized, just like Lucifer is demonized in religion? Because Lucifer, which is another archetype or representative of Set, quote unquote, was a critical thinker. Just because God said bow down, he's like, fuck that. Why? Why I got to bow down? I'm superior. I ain't no different. You ain't no different than me. I ain't no different than you. Why the fuck I got to do that? Now that's portrayed in religious circles as being evil. Why is that evil? Because in essence, he was right. The thing he was being told to bow down to, he was created from the same essence. And he didn't feel the need to, because he says, I'm just as good or better. Well, Set was saying the same thing. You ain't scaring me with that fear tactic bullshit, because I know that I'm created of the same essence, and the bullshit that you're trying to stir up, I am beyond and greater than that. It resides within me, around me, without me, but I'm always in control of it. And the Lucifer concept was the same thing. So when you're reading those stories, understand that. What made that wrong? The only thing that makes it wrong is when you present it from a religious perspective. That is evil. When people say shit like, what is evil? Have them describe to you. Please define for me in your terms. What is evil? And you're going to get a broad different, and again, it's going to go back to some type of religious rhetoric. And these are going to be people that claim, quote unquote, not to be religious. Okay? So when somebody's saying, and when you hear somebody say, well, that was wrong. Wrong based on what? On religious ideology? Yes. If you're a religious person, of course, That goes against your ideology. That's what makes it wrong. But what about the person that's not religious and doesn't subscribe to that ideology? Guess what? It's not wrong to him or her. It's completely right. And your ideology would be wrong to their ideology. So now we're back to this fuckery. Is it really about right or wrong, good or bad? Or is it really about perspective based on your experiences from your subjective universe and what you gathered over the years through your experiences? See, that's the shit we don't want to talk about, right? And that's why I finished it up with the collective subjective universes. They don't work. Religions, dogmas, groups, organizations, cult leaders that saying, ruling one organization, you must think like it doesn't work, okay? Anyway, I don't even know why I got into all that. Some question. But anyway, just a guy's question about crowd. All right. What else we got? Brother Jack. Peace, brother. Hit me up tomorrow, man. I want to try to link up today, but I couldn't get back with you. But link me up. Give me a call tomorrow. Jack typed in something I was talking about earlier. Your body language is connected to your subconscious. Yes, because the way you carry yourself on the outside reflects how you feel on the inside. So don't take this the wrong way, people. If you're a disgusting slob that doesn't care about yourself, I'm not talking about just, physically, that's part of it. Yes, your appearance, you should care about your appearance. If you don't care about your appearance and you're just dirty, stank, nasty, and you carry yourself, don't take this the wrong way. It shows and reflects how you feel on the inside. I always look, I don't mean to be judgmental. When I go to somebody's house, that's usually a telltale sign. I don't give a fuck. You don't have to agree with this. If I walk into somebody's house and it's jammed up, it's nasty and funky and dirty, that's all I need to know about that person. Because if your environment should reflect the way you feel on the inside. And if you're like that on the outside, I don't even want to know what the fuck is going on the inside. Look, that's not being judgmental. That's my right. That's my opinion. That's my methodology, how I've always approached and dealing with things. It works for me. You may not be in agreement with it. I really couldn't care if you are or you are not. If you're a funky nasty, if your house smells like Doritos, toes, and ass, and you don't clean your house, and you're a fucking disgusting person, then that's all I need to know what's going on the inside. There's that old saying, an adage we've heard over the years. My mother, you would say this, or you'd hear this in school. Godliness, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? So yes, your basic shit. This is what I'm talking about. How can you be an organized person internally if your shit is a hot mess externally, right? We don't want to talk about this shit. So don't sit here and tell me, oh, you shouldn't judge somebody because they have a messy house. Fuck no, I ain't just not judging somebody. It's being factual about it. Usually that's a reflection of the chaos that they're not putting in order internally. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. And I've found that to be 100% accurate my entire life. Okay? And I'm not saying this to say anybody's perfect and I'm not perfect. I'm not saying this to say there's not going to be moments where somebody's house is a little messy and sloppy. I'm not talking about that because even my house will be messy and sloppy momentarily. But I might have slight OCD. I just can't deal with filth and unorganized. That's just not me. But I'm saying when it's constantly in that state is a reflection of how you are and how you connect. Because remember, if there's a connection between the subjective and the objective, you can't tell me that there's not some type of connection there. You're just not conscious of it. Because if you're lazy and sloppy on the outside, it's showing you something that's going on the inside. You're just not addressing it. Because first and foremost, when you're doing ritualistic work and you're trying to set up the proper environment, you got to have some of that discipline and organization. All right. And quote unquote cleanliness. All right. What else we got? Yeah. All those things I was talking about earlier, and I see Gypsy God is typing something else. Like even women, like, when they're looking for attention, you could tell. So you bring up a good point, twisting their hair on bullshit. And it's usually a cover for some other type of insecurity. Usually male or females that are looking for attention, they lacked it when they were growing up. You could always smell that individual from a mile away. It's very easy. It's not a complicated thing to do. You must be a skilled observer on this path because it'll help you also recognize certain things within you. Okay? Oh, excuse me. Brother Jack typed in earlier. LHP helps you clear the mess in your subconscious to find your own true destiny. And that's what this path is all about. It's about finding your own true destiny, not some group's destiny that they dictated it. You have to do this. You must wear this. You can't do this. You can't eat that. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. That is not your destiny. Your destiny is you laying out your own path that works for you, because step one is realizing the fact that not one particular way works for everybody. Okay, that's a reality. The sooner you realize that, the better off you will be. Because how many of us have belonged to some type of religion or organization, and after a while we were just like, all right, that's enough. I had enough of this shit. There's not really else I can get out of it. Or you start to see the fuckery in it. That's because, one, you were never destined to stay in that unless you are a mental slave and you like to be programmed and you like to be told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. You understand? That doesn't work for critical thinkers, masters, gods, goddesses. That shit don't work for us. We don't care nothing about that shit. I couldn't give a fuck if you get pissed off because I'm questioning the authenticity of your leader or some author, you read in a book. I don't give a fuck about that. If you get offended by it, damn, you got a lot of work to do about yourself. If it's that easy to get you that emotionally aroused, then you are a weak-minded, pathetic individual, and you can be manipulated. And those are the type of minds that certain powers that be look for. People that they can manipulate, people that they can control by feeding off of their emotions, whether it's fear, sensationalism, whatever the hell it might be. That's their goal, their objective, right? Okay. What else we got? Yeah, Double R mentioned earlier about Craig Mack. I mean, shit. They really got Craig Mack. And if you know, Craig Mack, who passed away not too long ago, he got caught up in that whole, I forgot where that group was, but he got caught up in some fanatical Christian group. Look, I know some people, they get caught up in that stuff. Their intent is good. They think they're doing something noble. Most of them don't realize, because they're at a traumatic point in their life, that's usually when they cling on to something fanatical. And as you know, he was going through some serious health problems. So usually it's like when an individual goes to prison. How many motherfuckers we know came out of prison and they were either saved or they converted to Islam, right? Being in a traumatic situation, you would definitely cling to something very objective, that's tangible, that you can connect with. And you will try to cling on to something external as justification to connect with, to make you feel or cover up some type of insecurity that you weren't able to address. It's the same concept, but it might manifest in different situations or scenarios. And that's kind of how I look at what happened with Craig Mack and others. Look at also good example. Speaking of entertainers / rappers, look at Mace for an example, right? Another confused motherfucker. Let me tell you why I say that. All right, obviously you remember Mace when he came out in the 90s, early to mid 90s, and he had his success with Bad Boy, him and his homosexual buddy Pete Diddy, which I always thought they were gay. That's a whole other story. Then when the fame, when that style went out, obviously, because to me his style was always corny. I was never into that cornball talk sing along shit. They even kind of do that now. But when that kind of style went out and got played out and wasn't happening no more, then usually people can't deal with a traumatic situation in life. They can't deal with, let's say in his case, he was at the high peak of success, right? And then it's traumatic when it's all snatched from you. When literally the hit records aren't being made no more. You're not selling out arenas no more. The money's not rolling in like it was anymore. So what this nigga do? He ran and became super religious. Now he was in the gospel. Some of you that follow music know what I'm talking about. Then a couple of years ago, not too long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, he tried to come back. He went from being super sanctified Christian to murder Mace, right? We all know how that went, right? That didn't go over too well. Came back, got a real dose of medicine that he was played out in times of change and his style was whacked. His ass went right back into doing Christian rapping. Classic example of somebody that doesn't understand the reality of their objective and subjective. And usually something traumatic or something that has a strong impact on their emotions and their subconscious will usually lead somebody to do that. Same thing with MC Hammer, right? MC Hammer, God, that's some funny ass fucking story. MC Hammer was probably had more money at one point than any rapper could ever imagine having their hands on. Because we all know, long story short, we know he invested it pretty fucking stupid. He was paying an entourage to absolutely do nothing. He was taking out mortgages and loans on cars that he really didn't need. Long story short, we know he went bankrupt and, you know, scared his ass right back into the sanctified Christian thing. You know, it became a hustle for him now. And he's smart to realize that let me cling on to something that I'm familiar with because, you know, we knew that's one last an example experiences that an individual will go through and leave some type of a traumatic impact on their lives. Okay. And trauma comes in all forms. Let's make that clear. We're not talking about just complete mental delusional trauma. We're talking about how it affects you and you're not even aware of it. And sometimes you can't even recognize it until you observe your actions and your behaviors. That's the shit that I'm talking about. So understand trauma comes in all shapes, sizes, forms, and fashions. Not just that delusional mental crazy aspect that we think. It's deeper than that. All right. Sister Sonia typed in, oh no, I have to really be about it. Hell yeah, you have to. That's the motto on this path. You can't talk about it, you got to be about it. I couldn't let me say this, man. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I don't care of how much shit you know about Egypt. I don't care if you know the Metu Neter. I don't care if you can prove it was deciphered or not. Because at the end of the day, that's not doing shit for anybody. It's not improving anybody's life. Because my first question to anybody, all right, that's great. If we're just having just to shoot the shit, I get it. But at what point in any point in my life is Metu Neter going to become useful to me? Knowing it, if I could speak it or not. I mean, we all could speak basic of it, studying it, but who gives a shit? We argue over pointless nonsense. I couldn't care about how back in the day this and that, back in the day this and that. I told you most conscious people have melanitis, have messiah-itis and back in the day itis. Do you understand? And that's a problem because we don't sit around on this path talking about how great we used to be. We talk about how great we are now and how great we can become. Because all of that back in the day talk shit is not going to do anything for me in 2018, but have me find a crutch to lean on, some excuse, some avenue, some way out that I can justify my failures. That's that crutch. So let me sit around, bitch, moan, and complain about what it is I don't got or what it is I can't do, but never talk about what it is I can do. You understand? It doesn't work on this path. So yes, you must not talk about it. You must be about it. The Oni types in using a Odu sign. Sanctions avoiding those who are not looking for solutions. Here we go back to not using critical thinking, but dogma. Yeah. And look, dogmas, look. There are dogmas when you exclusively subscribe to them, and most religions have dogmas or / creeds. Now you can take any dogma or creed and adjust it to suit and fit you on your personal path to self-mastery. But when it's presented as the exclusive tell-all, and it has to be lined up this way and this way only, that's when it becomes officially, quote unquote, CSU dogma. And we don't deal with that. Sister Sewing type there. One problem is that people are too external and easily to be led, even in thought, to external things. I think if one learns to pull back from all the external stimuli and learn to go inside to make the changes, they will be better for it. And you must remember something we always say on this path. Remember, most religions and dogmas, it's always an outward journey to an inward journey, whereas it's completely reverse on this path. It's always from the inside out, and we always start with ourselves. And step one is look. When you look within yourself, be real with yourself. Analyze yourself and say, this is what I do good. This is what I suck at. And once you make that list, right, there's a little basic ritual you can do, and you'll find this a similar ritual in a lot of spiritual, mystical systems over the years. A lot of these self-initiation mirror rituals work with this. One way to simply do this, I'm gonna give you a real simple, basic ritual, real easy. One aspect of this ritual, if you went to that Luciferian website that I had given out a few weeks ago and looked at the self-initiation ritual on there, part of this was incorporated in that ritual, by the way. But you can just do this part. Simply, get a mirror, get 2 black candles and put it on each side of the mirror. And I would just simply tell you, make sure the room has no light but those 2 candles. If you need to burn a little incense, burn a little incense to create the mood. I wouldn't put on any music or any sounds because it'll distract your focus and your concentration. Do a couple little breathing exercises to rid, your body of stale energy in your lungs, in your circulatory system, whatever breathing exercises you might practice. I would, after doing those breathing and cleansing, exercises, get yourself in a state of concentration, relax, and then start to look in the mirror and focus upon yourself. Really study your face, study your features, study your eyes, study your nose, and just relax and really gaze into the mirror and look at all aspects of your face. You will find, one, I'm going to tell you a couple things are going to happen when you do this. You will find as you zone in and look at your face is going to start to change into a multitude of different appearances. You might see, and you're going to find out as you really zone in and focus on it, you're going to see past people you were in past lives. Trust me when I tell you. You might see an old Native American manifest in that mirror. That's what you were at one point. You might manifest into a aspect of your personal daemon. It might take on a whole different form. I'm just giving you examples from some of my experiences. Not saying you're going to have the same ones, but I can tell you in talking with other people, they've had similar. So I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same. As you focus and zone in on your face on this concentration ritual, a lot of thoughts will start to come to the surface in your mind, good and bad things about yourself. Try when you're done doing that and you feel like you've given enough of time to focus in on your image and yourself in that mirror, take your journal, book out and write down the things that came to mind when you did this, the good and the bad things. Make you a list. See how you can connect both and how one can strengthen the other, because some of your weaknesses, some of your aggressions, let's say, can fix some of the, or enhance some of the other things that you're already good at, and vice versa. You might be able to use some of your strengths to address some of your weaknesses. This is how we approach this path. This is what we mean when we say do the work. This is what we mean when we say it's an inward journey out, not an outward journey in. That's a simple, basic working that you can do to see. You're going to find out by something basic and simple as that. A lot of shit is going to come to the surface when you do that ritual. You will see a lot of different aspects of your true self. And when you do this ritual, trust me, a lot of different emotions will come to the surface. You might find yourself just laughing for no reason. You might find yourself very emotional and, bawling, tears coming down. Sadness, because I found in doing this ritual, and I've done it several times over the years, past people in your life people that have passed on tend to come through. And usually when that happens, when you're doing this work in a ritual, is because that individual has had an impact on your life, and they impacted you more than you're aware of. It could be good or bad. You might find out somebody that passed away years ago that you thought you were completely over or put into perspective comes to mind, and you get emotional. And then you might have to inwardly reflect, what is it I got emotional when I thought about that individual in this ritual? Well, there was something that's connected to you that had an impact on your life. And you need to identify what it is, because that can help you identify shit you might need to work on. That will happen in this ritual. Trust me when I tell you. It could be if your mother, your father, your grandparents, your uncle, your aunt, whoever might be deceased, tend to pass through that mirror. Trust me when I tell you. It's a great mirror. It's actually a Luciferian practice in nature. And all I can tell you is this: there will be some aspect of that in the ritual we're going to do. I ain't going to tell you how, what. There will be an aspect of that. That also deals with demonic integration, your higher self, your real self. The purpose of that type of basic working that I just threw out there is to get you to understand who you really are, your real self. That's step one on this path. One, Not who you think you are. You hear me say this many times over the years. Not who you think you are, not who you want, because then there's this other delusional thing we chase our whole lives is who we portray ourselves, who we want people to see us as. That's the big fucking illusion that some people spend their whole lives trying to work. We create this false persona, how we want people to see us as. Not that, but who you really are. Doing work like that is going to bring you to the realization, this is who I really am. This is the good stuff about me. This is the fucked up stuff about me. Then the critical thinker, the proactive god or goddess is going to say, this is how I'm going to address this and fix this and work on this. I know it's not going to be overnight. I know it's not going to take 1 day, 2 days, a week, a month. It could take years. But step one is I recognize it. Step two is I'm going to now put a plan in action. I'm going to put something in action to now address this shit. Because what good is it if you identify and then you just don't do anything about it? What's the fucking point of that? This is the point of this path. This is what this event that we're going to be doing at the end of the month, the journey of a Black adept. It's a great feeling. Man, look, I can't describe it. It's like standing on the edge of the beach and looking out into the ocean and being able to look behind you and look to see where you came from and where you're at now and go, damn, I've been through some shit, but I understand it now. I recognize it. I know how to put it all into perspective, and it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to be really enlightened, right? Not just I'm woke and I'm conscious, because that don't even mean shit to me no more. Because more people that claim to be woke/conscious don't really know shit, because that is subjective in nature. You understand? Because my concept of being conscious is not what somebody else is. I'm gonna be honest with you. On the surface, most people are conscious because they read a few books on Egypt. That don't mean you're conscious. It just means you read a few books. That's all I mean. All right. What else we got? Well, good comment by Sister Sonia. So, Sister Sonia tells us, what do you do with those you give readings to or utilize critical thinking but seem afraid to move forward? Well, I can tell you this, doing the same thing, doing consultations and readings. And those that have worked with me, what is one thing I say to everybody, for those that know me and have done readings and consultations with me? I simply say this to them. One, I couldn't give a shit what you do with this or don't do with it. That's not my objective. So you got to take that approach to people like that. Number one. Number two, it's pointless if you're going to get all this information and you don't apply it. So long story short, you can't control if they want to utilize it or not. I simply tell them, one, I don't care if you do or do not, because I say that in the sense not to just be a callous asshole that doesn't care. I say it to the fact because I understand you can't make anybody do something that they don't want to do. They have to want to do it for themselves. So that's just my simple way of saying I don't really, one, stress, worry, or care about that, because that's not my job. My job is to just, when I'm doing a consultation or a reading, whatever the spirits pass through in that reading, if that individual's ancestors come through, I'll tell them this is your grandmother, such and such. This is what she's saying. If they don't want to utilize any of that information, that's on them. I couldn't care. That's not my job. My job is providing a service. You got to remember, when you're doing work like that, you got to understand the fine line between business and personal. Understand there is still a business aspect. So meaning I understand the business aspect. If somebody pays for a service and I commit to a time, and those that know me, I commit to that time. I stick to it. I got to understand it's a business. Because if you expect, when you order on Amazon, you walk into a store, you expect to get what you pay for. The problem is with some people in the conscious community is when it comes to business ethics, they don't understand what that is. See, we got this concept, we can just deal with each other any way we want. We don't give shit in a timely manner. We pay for shit and motherfuckers disappear. You don't hear from them. That's not how we're supposed to deal with each other. So when it comes to making people do what you want, if you understand the business ethical part of it and the spiritual part and understand the line in between, that's all you can do. You can't make a motherfucker do and do not. As long as you've done your part and you carried out your commitments and your requirements as a spiritualist, that's all you can do. Because I honestly say that from the bottom of my heart. When I'm done with that session, look, it's a great feeling to me when people contact me afterwards. And again, I say this, when I do work, I give you the information, what you need to do to carry out the work and do it yourself. I don't do shit for you. And those that know me know that's how I work and operate. But it's a great feeling to get a call a week, 2 weeks later, a month, 2 months later, and say, hey, Brother Manidi, man, I appreciate the stuff we talked about in the consultation. I went ahead and did this. This is what happened. That is a great feeling when you get that response from an individual that did the work for themselves, not because you did it for them or you told them. Remember, you're just being used as a vessel. You're being able, not just that you're using your energy, but you're able to tap in and zone in and connect. Really, it's their spirits and their energy that's manifesting and coming forward in the reading. And in time, they will learn to discipline and utilize that. So you're basically reading the energy that's around them. So when you're doing a reading or a consultation with somebody and you see their grandmother sitting there and they're communicating something to you to tell the individual, if they're letting you know that they're there all the time, but that individual needs to discipline themselves to break that barrier wall while they're not having that communication. That's all. So that's how I approach it. That's how I've always worked with my spirit guides, how I've always been connected with my ancestors. This is the way I've been groomed by elders and teachers over the years in different systems I belong to. I've always taken that approach from day one. I'm not interested in saving anybody, converting anybody. That's not my job. My job is, look, if we have a gift as teachers, whatever it might be, spiritualists, our job is to use that to the best of our ability, how we see fit and how we feel we can impact others. That's all you can do. I'm not worried about recruiting anybody. I'm not worried about getting anybody to join anything. I'm not worried about getting anybody to listen to what I have to say. And one, I laugh occasionally when you get the knuckleheads here and there that'll send a stupid ass email or that'll come into the chat room and say something fucking dumb. I couldn't care. That shit is irrelevant to me. If you think after I get off of this that I sit around thinking about any of that shit, you're completely fucking delusional, because it's a memory. As soon as I sign off this computer, I'm focused on what I got to do in my life, in my realm, and what I'm trying to accomplish in life. I couldn't give a fuck. This shit stays here. That's how you got to approach this in general. That's how you keep your emotions in check. I saw somebody laid it down. I'm gonna get in it. How do you control or keep your emotions in check? One, by understanding your place and scheme of things and not letting that external shit stimulate you and affect you. Because first of all, when you got, like in this day and age, especially in a setting like this, as I said before, you got what we call computer gangsters, right? People that hide behind keyboards and screen names and don't show their face and don't identify who they are. Look, I'm here. You see me. You know who the fuck I am. You know where I'm at. I ain't got shit to hide. So if you're going to talk shit and talk smack, at least don't be a pussy. Show your face, identify who and what you are, and grow a pair of balls. Or if you're a female, put on your big girl drawers and identify who the fuck and what you are. Don't hide behind a computer and a screen name and talk shit. That's some punk ass shit. So just by that alone, I can't even feed that no credence. It's not reality. And, over the years, even in my more hothead days, I've offered to meet with people head on. They never show up, or they refuse, or they disappear, But then I got to the point where I said to myself, I couldn't give a fuck if you agree with what I'm saying or not. Because you know what? Now let's apply basic common sense. If you don't like what I'm talking about, change the fucking channel. It's that simple. The very fact that you stay here and want to make dumbass comments or say stupid shit shows that I got up in here, because there's something I'm saying that's triggering a thinking point in your brain. Whether it's something because it pissed you off about some type of personal belief you have about something, because I'm saying something that may not line up with that, you're aggravated. Well, guess what? I did my job. If I can get you to think, or maybe even inspect or investigate what you think is the sole truth on everything in life, then I did my job. That's it. That's how you keep all that shit in check. So that's the problem with this whole social media thing. It's a great tool, as I said before in the past. It's great because you can come on here and reach multiple people simultaneously. That's a beautiful thing. And I focus on that aspect of it, right? But then there's a negative side of it where it's used for cyberbullying. It's, again, you got these old punk ass bitches I call keyboard gangsters, male and female. They hide behind their computer and keyboard and talk shit, knowing damn well 99.9% of them, if they were in front of your face, they'd have not a damn fucking thing to say. All that shit that they popping out of their mouth, they wouldn't even be talking it. Trust me when I tell you. Remember, I wasn't groomed in this shit here. I'm 47-year-old grown ass man. This shit started for me out on the streets. So I dealt with that street shit. So I want to make that clear. Don't think this is what the fuck this is not my roots and where I came from. This is something new in the last 7, 8 years, or not even shit, whatever. this what I'm saying is a lot of these new jacks, as we like to call them, these millennials, that's the term they use for these motherfuckers, who are disconnected from everyday reality. I'm talking about those motherfuckers that they sit on the couch and have the world at their fingertips. This motherfucker right here. Smartphones. Just because you have a smartphone don't make you motherfucking smart. Trust me when I tell you that. Okay? So know my roots is in the streets. And I try to leave the street mentality in the streets. But I can tell you this, if it's got to come back out in certain situations, I'll bring that motherfucker out. That's all I got to say. But anyway, in relation to what we're talking about, to the question, only you can't control if people are going to take your advice or not. Move forward. Just do what you got to do. All right, what else we got? Double R. I go within a lot. I stay on a mission to be better and have a better understanding of life and death for that matter. Now, that's the next class I'm getting ready to do. It's going to be called Demystifying Death. That's going to be the next one, Tuesday. Because that's a lot. That's some people's serious problem. Why they cling to certain spiritual systems. And again, I'm not talking about you, Double R. Since you brought that up, I'm going to address two things you said in there. A lot of people fail, suffer, and they spend their whole life wondering about this thing called death, right? Lack of knowledge of it is what creates the fear. I'm going to get into a whole in-depth presentation on demystifying that. That's what we're going to call it. Understanding it is a tremendous aspect to help you on your path, number one, and two, deal with it when you deal with it as far in relationship to others around you. And as I told y'all before, if you go back to videos I did at the beginning, end of last year, beginning of this year, and I can attest a lot of you will resonate with this. I said on a lot of those videos, don't know which ones, just go back to videos from December of last year and January. I told you this would be the year of death. 2018, there's going to be more death than you've seen. And I wasn't talking about death just in the news and the media and famous people. If you can reflect, be real with yourself, from the beginning of this year till the present day, you either dealt with a lot of death this year or you knew somebody constantly, whether it was work, friend, another family, somebody was dealing with some aspect of death. Okay. And there's a science behind that. I'm going to elaborate a little more on that another time. Where we're in a certain, what we call energy current. If you understand, if you really study, and if you really understand the time frame that we're in right now and why we're supposed to be connected with this, it will make a lot more sense to you. Now, I don't want to get too in depth with it now because it's going to open up, doorways and more time. I'm going to elaborate on all that next week. Demystifying death. Let's go back and I tell you, I'm saying this here in October or something I said back in December and January of last year. I told a lot of y'all, a lot of you, and I know this personally from you guys emailing, a majority of you, I'm not saying everybody in this room, but majority of you dealt with more death this year, probably than you could have reflected on in any other period in your life. Trust me when I tell you that. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to tap into that. We'll get into that a little more. That's going to tie into all of next week's topic. Okay. But the other part of your statement, you always should be on a mission to better yourself. You should always strive to get up, to better yourself every day. What do we get up? Why do we do the things we do? Why do we run a business, go to work, or master our career, or whatever it is we do? I hope we set out to do it every day to be the best we can be, to better ourselves. Your goal on this path is to be the best person you can be spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. I say that personal invocation at my altar every morning. Say that to yourself every day you get up. Today, my name is, say your name, I seek knowledge, power, and pleasure. Say this every morning you get up. And I seek to master myself on all levels, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. Keep saying that shit to yourself every day when you get up. It gets embedded in your subconscious, right? And I'm going to talk about this. Look, here. I forgot to mention this. Let me read this. Do you really know what abracadabra means? Watch this. You're going to get a kick out of this. And there's a statement that comes along with it, right? We hear that. We think it's just part of comical Hollywood entertainment, right? Watch this. You're going to find this very humorous. And then I'm going to read another statement that comes along with that. Give me a second to find this. This shit is some funny ass shit. All right. Hold on. I'm going to put my old man glasses on and see this damn red. And I'm going to read a short statement. I'm glad this comes up. Okay. With my words, I create. Okay. So here's the breakdown on this. You probably heard this word. We've all heard that word, I'm sure, at some point. Okay. All right. Anyway. Your understanding, thought, or reason of all things is termed understanding, or in its old English terms, understanding, right? And the materialistic component substance are both alliterations to the term stance or standing from the Italian word stanza, which means something having qualities that are suggestive of or likened to those of poetry. Both words allude to subservience to a greater entity of the whole, under and subversions of the whole. Stance or stanza is similar to this aspect to the word universe. Watch this. Which also alludes to a musical or sound-based ancient understanding of all things. Indeed, in the Bible, there are many references to the universe being built from the word of God, right? You can also find this in the Egyptian mysteries when it says Tar thought himself into existence, right? We'll talk a little bit about that. Built from the word of God, and in the magical realms, the word abracadabra, right? You hear this, abracadabra, alakazam, right? Abracadabra literally means with my words I create. So when you see that shit and you see a magician go abracadabra, they're saying with their words I create. Well, guess what? You all should be abracadabra motherfuckers, man, because abracadabra ties into with my words I create what I speak. Right? I realize what I see. I am that I am. So when you see that term in the Bible, right, where Yahweh or Jehovah says to Moses in the burning bush, he says, who are you? I am that I am. What did he mean? With my words, I create. With my words, I speak, I create. I am that I am. See, when you look at the esoterical meaning, see, that's how a Luciferian looks at the quote unquote Bible, because we understand quote unquote the esoterical meanings. So now when you hear that word abracadabra, you're going to fucking scratch your head and go, oh, I see now why. Now just think how slick they were to use that in movies in Hollywood, and it's used as a joke or for entertainment purposes. But go research the origin and the root of the word, and you will find out it means when somebody says abracadabra, with my words I create. Where do your words formulate from? Your subjective, right? When you read the Egyptian stories in the pyramid text where it says Tar thought himself into existence by the words he created, right? What does it say in the Bible? The Bible subscribed to that, right? Where it says in the book of John, in the very first chapter, in the beginning was what? Was the Word. And the Word was with God. And what? The Word was God. Abracadabra, motherfuckers. That's what that basically means. Okay? It's not that complex. We make it more complex. What is that? What is that? Now, you get, when you hear that biblical verse in John, Christians give some fucked up explanations on it. Well, that's Jesus and Jesus. Yeah, I can relate to that to an extent, that word, because Jesus was technically a mouthpiece, quote unquote, of the word of God, but it goes deeper than that. You understand? So when you look at it as an enlightened one, it takes on a different meaning. That's all I'm trying to say. I think you get the point. So abracadabra. That's going to be the word, everybody. We start saying that to each other. Abracadabra. With my words, I create. All right. So what else we got? I think double R, that might be a spell check error. I'm not sure. I think you meant to type in a ruler, if I'm not mistaken. I think unless you typed in something I'm not familiar with. I believe that's what you meant to type in. Maybe not. Okay. Now, I don't know if you were talking about the Japanese or you were talking about Orula. I'm not sure if it's a spell check error, but if it wasn't, from what I pulled up, because I'm not too familiar with it, hold on, let me pull it up here. If this is what you were talking about, I'm not sure if that was. Or an enemy family in the mythological Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm not sure if you were talking about that character. There are many different types of Orluga. They are large grill-like species, similar in appearance. I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about. Maybe you put something down there. There's a Japanese tradition of these entities, if you were talking about them, or maybe you were referring to the Ifa aspect of Orula. But I'll see if you put something down later. Orula, okay, I see. It's right down there. My bad. It's crazy because what you typed in, here's what I'd suggest you do. Okay, you typed in RLUGA. Now, whether you knew it or not, that's something that really exists. So that might be your daemon self come to the surface, that there might be something in there you need to research in those entities, because I'm reading it and it's very interesting. You might want to look into that. Type it up. That actually exists. Now, that can't be a coincidence that you put that in there. It goes back to Japanese mythology. I'm just saying, might be something that you did purposely, because there might be some awareness in there you need to make yourself aware with. Something in there might be pertinent. But when dealing with Orula, okay, I'll address that real quick. But it's funny, there is such a thing as Orluga. I'd go look at that. Actually pronounced in Japanese, the L is silent. Oruga, it's pronounced. That's what I'm looking at here. But I'd look into it, and I don't think that's a coincidence. But anyway, again, you're going to have many different aspects of how people perceive Orula. Orula would be kind of how the Christians or the Muslims look at, quote unquote, the Most High God, right? Orula is the mouthpiece of God. He's always utilized when you see the system of Ifa or divination, or using the Odus of Ifa. That's explained as, quote unquote, God speaking, or the mouthpiece of God. When you work with the 7 African powers, if you've ever seen a 7 African power candle, Orula is pretty much the facilitator of those 7 African powers. Obatala, meaning he represents the unseen forces, where Obatala represents the Most High, quote unquote, on the planet Earth, right? When you break down the word Obatala, you even hear the Arabic word in there, Allah, right? And you hear the word Father in there, and you hear Father, Most High Father, God. Different breakdowns in different Semitic languages. Understand, you will hear, even in Swahili, when you go into the Swahili language, the Yoruba language, you will see some of the Arabic infused in there, because remember, Arabic will have some of those connections. There's a good book that I referred to a while back, the connection between the Yoruba and the Egyptian deities. I'll see if I can pull it up. I can't remember it offhand. I actually did it. I gave it to some of y'all. Some of you have it. You might know. Maybe you could type it in. I can't remember it offhand. Remember, prior to what we know as the Islamic holy site today, the Kaaba, remember, at one point, before the Muslims took control of the Kaaba, there was deities in there, or statues of idols in there that were Yoruba in nature. And that book gets into it in depth. So understand there's a connection to an extent between the two, and understand the phonetics and the etymology of the words. So Obatala represents the presence of the Most High God on earth. When you read the creation story of the Orisha, right, or what they call the Potaki, right, which is the stories of how the Orishi came to be, the concept in Ifa theology of how the planet was created, and Orula's hand in that, because there's a ritual that some of us had to go through in Ifa called the Hand of Orula, right, where you go through this ceremony, and some have to get it if they're extremely ill. There's different reasons for getting it, not just for that. And the Babalawos are, and the word Babalawo means father of the mysteries. So a Babalawo is a priest of Orula, meaning they represent, or they're the priesthood of Orula. on the planet Earth. A lot of Babalawas, not all. You'll find a lot of them, their guardian Orishi is Obatala. Not all of them, I'm not saying all of them. A lot of them have different Orishis that rule the head, but that's what Orula would represent, the unseen forces, right? Now, this is theology, so keep that in mind. I'm not saying that it makes 100%. It is a little religious in nature, but when we talk about the quote unquote invisible realm, the unseen powers of the creator or God, that's Orula. And that manifests through deviation by way of the Ifa Odus, right? When you study Ifa, right? Obatala was the first message. This is, again, I'm saying all this according to Ifa theology. Keep that in mind. I am not saying this because I 100% subscribe to it or believe it wholeheartedly. I'm saying this that when I was in it, this is what I was taught, and this is what I subscribed to at the time. I'm not saying that this is what I 100% agree with now, so I want to make that clear. So when you read the creation story of the Patakis of the Orishi, Obatala was the one sent down to keep things in order, quote unquote, on the planet Earth. Then you have some of the main Orishi that come from those creation stories, how the earth was formed, sand, the water. Then remember, you have Shango, oil, all these different Orishis represent different elements in nature and creation. So now you're dealing again with the micro and the macrocosm, the representation of these Orishis externally by way of creation and how they interconnect with you. And we need to focus more on what aspect they represent with us. Some people connect it to the different chakras, which if you want to get very metaphysical and spiritual, there's books where you can connect each Orishi to each chakra center. That tends to be effective in some people's spiritual work. That works. But really what it's supposed to teach you is the divine aspect of what these quote unquote gods represent within you. That's the key you want to focus on this path. Whereas traditionally, a lot of Ifa practitioners, Santeria practitioners, they more externally worship. Now, again, if that's their choice, that's what they do. Me, I don't really fuck with that like that on that level. I tend to think that's something people should try to navigate and gravitate away from, and look for the Oshun energy within you, not looking to worship it externally. Look for that Shango fire that resides within. We all have it. You know, like I said, my guardian Orishi is Oshun. That's something, that I found out years ago, and that's what I got initiated into when I went through the whole system. That was my guardian Orishi, right? But I now look at it, being on this path, having put aside all the rhetoric, I understand how the Oshun energy works within me. I don't get caught up in the external aspect of it. So look at Orula as a manifestation or a conglomeration of all those energies. But as they manifest, sometimes they manifest in different fragments within you. So look at Orula as the source, and you are that source. Everything is connected to you. But sometimes in our nature and personality, different fragments or aspects of that energy manifest to the surface. So then the skilled magician has to know how to utilize them, when, where, and how. That's how I approach Ifa on this path now. Whereas traditional aspect would more have you focus on a religious external aspect. But that's kind of basic in a nutshell. And yeah, Brother Ravana Noon typed in, I really begin to critically think when I stop relying on external things and use my own God mind for my own ways and actions. Yeah, and as I said earlier, you always, it doesn't just start and end in the chamber room. This is something you should be doing constantly. And as long as you apply it, look, it could be something as basic as budgeting, as sitting down and putting a proper budget together that works for you. That's critical thinking. Because you're not a critical thinker if you think on impulse and you just shit money away. And knowing you're going outside of your means, then you're not a critical thinker. You're a reactive person that just reacts off of instinct. And you don't think about the consequences later, so you just go piss and shit money away. But then you realize when there's bills to be paid, you ain't got no money. So critical thinking can come in the form of so basic as putting a budget together. You understand? That's magic. You may not think it is because you say that's just basic, everyday, mundane shit. But that's how you got to learn to apply magic on a mundane, everyday level, not just in the chamber room. That's what I meant when I said All right. Only type in, yeah, that's another good way to look at Aruna, is the energy of your destiny and helping you to focus on it. And everything I was just explaining, I was just giving you more of a detailed aspect of that. So it ties into all those aspects. Okay, Sister Sonia typed in, critical thinking has no room for emotional, reactionary thinking or behavior. I mean, there's nothing even really to add to that. That speaks for itself. No doubt, because you can't be in a state of mind of critical thinking if you're just a reactionary type of person. So if you're that person that watches the news and you react and you get emotional about everything you see on there, it's done for a reason. And like I said before, remember, nothing has really changed. You might think shit is worse, but it's really not, because why I say that is, as I said many times in the past, with social media, with things being loaded and uploaded in real time, as soon as it happens, it creates this illusion that things are happening more nowadays than they were back then. And I use that in reference to police brutality. It's still the same thing, okay? It's just you're seeing it more because you're living in a different day and time where they can upload this shit in real time. All right. What else we got? So Sony types. No, double R. I feel I'm really being tested in mastering my emotions. We're always going to be tested in that. That's never going to go away. Understand this. Whether it's anything you're trying to make order of, right? Look at that as your personal chaos, right? Anything you're trying to gain a hold on, for lack of a better word, in this case, we're talking about emotions. And I'm not saying this, that you're saying this, double R. I'm speaking in general now. If you ever think you're going to wake up one day and all your emotions are going to be perfect and you got them completely under control and you're never going to get emotional ever again, complete bullshit. It's understanding that I'm always going to experience different levels of emotion, meaning there's going to be periods of time you will continue to experience moments of happiness, joy, laughter, sadness, ecstasy, pleasure, pain, all those different things. You will experience them on a multitude of levels. That's a give me. That's always going to happen. Let's establish that. Understanding how to put them in its perspective is a different thing. What do I mean by that? Are you controlled by your pain and misery? Are you controlled by your insecurities? Are you controlled by your anger, your jealousy, and your rage? Then that becomes a problem. Or can you take some of the emotions of anger, jealousy, and rage that might be controlling you and channel that energy in another direction that might be beneficial? It's one way to look at it. Can you facilitate your emotions when it comes to sadness? Let me give you an example. Maybe a traumatic event happened in your life, loss of a loved one, etc. Are you able to shed your tears, mourn, put it in its perspective, understand it, and move forward? Or are you an individual that gets consumed by the sadness and goes into a state of depression and can't move forward? See, identifying, again, being a critical thinker is being able to establish that. That's how you're going to be able to get those emotions in check. Some people become slaves to their emotions and they fail. And emotion can be, too, being impulsive, as I said earlier, with money. You might struggle with money all the time because, have you heard that term? You're an impulse shopper, an impulse buyer. You just see something, you got to have it, and you don't care how much it sets you back. How many people do you know like that? They go buy shit they can't afford. They go buy a house, ain't got no furniture in it. They go buy a car, they're paying a ridiculous payment, but they ain't got no damn food in their refrigerator. That's not being a critical thinker. That's being a fucking ignorant jackass that doesn't even have common sense. So whether you may not think that that's magic, then you don't really understand magic. That is a form of magic, being able to put things like that in order, your everyday life. But if you can organize your everyday life, when I say organize it for your personal needs, and that organization has created a very productive and successful life for you, that's some of the greatest magic you can ever create. This path teaches you that. Okay, so if you can't grasp that concept, if you can't get a mastery on everyday things in your life, how in the world are you going to even work greater black magic? When you can't even master the mundane shit like budgeting money. I mean, come on, man. That's common fucking sense. That's just like the average conscious coon that wants to sit there and tell you about levitating and how spiritual and deep they are, but they're living in their mom's basement. You know, you understand what I'm saying? And they ain't got $5 in their pocket, and they got 3 kids. You know, the brother can't take care of him. He can't pay child support, but he wants to tell you how you can become a god. That's fucking. And nobody don't see nothing wrong with that. Because when somebody comes at with me giving advice, I would never give anybody an advice on something I'm not successful at. Because if I'm trying to give somebody advice, one, I should have experience, and I should be a living example of success of that. So if I'm going to give somebody advice, let's say on finances, I better have a track record of success with finances. If I'm a motherfucker that struggles with finances, I can't hold a job or a business, or I've made terrible business decisions, but I want to give you advice on money. I mean, come on, man. Well, I mean, that's just basic common fucking sense. So that's how you master those emotions, okay? Yeah, Brother Ron who typed in, utilizing reasoning, which is based on logic, is important for critical thinking. And as I said before, basic logic and common sense, some people don't have that, and that's the problem. And you can't teach common sense. As I said a million times in the past, you either have common sense or you don't. There's no in between. And sometimes I've ran into so many people, they got book knowledge. They got book knowledge. They can regurgitate shit. They can recite shit. They memorize shit. They got academic knowledge. They might have a degree from some college or university, and that's great. Power to you. But then when you talk to them about common sense, they don't have it. If you don't have a mixture of both, it's tough to be a critical thinker. So just because you got some degree or some type of academic understanding where you can regurgitate shit, that don't mean you are a critical thinker. Let's understand that. Okay. Only typed in earlier, cognitive dissonance is a serious element of something. Yes, that's a huge, in speaking of Crowley's statement earlier, recognizing our limitations. And some people suffer from cognitive dissonance and they don't understand or recognize it. I hope everybody understands what cognitive dissonance is, right? Just in case you don't, let's talk about this real briefly. I talked about it earlier, but I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to give you the online definition of it, just to give you the general. Okay? This sums it up in a nutshell. And this deals with psychology. The state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change, right? In the field of psychology, cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort experienced by a person who simultaneously holds 2 or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. This discomfort is triggered by a situation in which a belief of a person clashes with new evidence perceived by that person. Need I say any more? How many motherfuckers have you run into that have cognitive dissonance? When you challenge their belief systems, their ideology, what does it say here? Let me read that again. A discomfort is triggered by a situation in which their belief has been challenged. So they get all fired up and upset, right? Or they have an inconsistency in beliefs or as it said up here, inconsistent thoughts and beliefs or attitudes, right? Or they have what's called simultaneously 2 or more contradictory beliefs. How many times have you talked to the religious person? How many times have you talked to the Nuwapian that contradicts themselves in their doctrine and they get all heated and hot at the collar when you point it out, right? That's what this is talking about. How many people now can you say suffer from cognitive dissonance? Now, if somebody comes to us on this path and says, hey, look, or somebody can say to me right now, there's something you said earlier about Luciferianism that I don't really agree with that. I think this. I would simply say to that, power to you. That's great. I'm glad that you have your own perspective on it. See, we don't have cognitive dissonance and say, wait a minute, you don't agree with what I said earlier up there. What are you talking about? Whoa. That's a person that suffers from cognitive dissonance, right? So you got 2 new things. That's what cognitive dissonance, motherfuckers, abracadabra. By my words I create, motherfucker. But you get my point. How many people now do you know suffer from that on a multitude of levels? The be right complex, It's my way or the highway. Oh no, I got a lock on truth. The spirituality I practice and study, this is the only right way. Oh, you're not doing it like this? Blah, 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 blah. Come on. You're suffering from cognitive dissonance. That's what that means. And that's usually another thing. When I was talking about earlier, people bringing old ways and methodologies into this path, they struggle because when they take those old ways, if you want to call them beliefs or methods, and they try to carry it over in this path, whether they're conscious of it or not, and they see it fails, that's what I meant earlier when I said sometimes it chases them back into doing the old shit that they were doing. And I can reflect back on several people over the years that came on this path were so dark and into black magic, and they were master necromancers and working with the dead, and they're some of the most spook sanctified Christians you'll ever see in this day and time right now. Because of that, something was triggered by way of this cognitive dissonance that scared their ass right back into the shit that they were doing. Okay. All right. What else we got? Sister Sonia types in that. Ravana Noon, congratulations. Is an order. Oh, yeah. Brother Ravana Noon got married, if y'all ain't aware. Brother, settle down. Player, turn this card in. Nah, but congratulations is in order to the brother. That's what she was referring to. All right. What else we got? All right. I'm skipping just personal conversation. What else we got? Somebody mentioned Nature Boy. Where was that? Did I miss something? All right, let me tell you something real quick about that. Yeah, let me read this. I guess that came up somewhere. Maybe I missed something up top. Gypsy Goddess typing, don't get me started on Nature Boy. Laughed my ass off. We were laughing about it the other day on a chat. But when I found out there are innocent kids involved, that's another ball game. What a hot mess. Yeah. All right. For those that may or may not know, Nature Boy is a product of Dr. York. Okay. He started out, now I can tell you this, of what I do know of him from back in the day. Okay. Not too long ago when I say back in the day, because he's not that old. He was never a full-fledged member, but he's highly influenced by Dr. York's books. I want to make this clear for anybody that runs across this fucking nutcase. And if you read his videos, yes, he's obviously got a very interesting perspective on his subjective, which I will speak for myself and nobody else. I tend to completely disagree with. And that's just me. And I'm not telling anybody to agree with my perspective on it, but I do want to point out something that Gypsy Goddess had in a comment. There are a lot of innocent kids and women involved in his fuckery. What he's basically done is started a cult-like small group where they're living in isolation and again, I don't want to get into too depth with it. Some of y'all might have heard the stories where he's, same cult shit that I talked about that happens with all these groups. There's an agenda. People move there, they give him all their belongings and all his money. They turn over all the money to him. They wind up getting sucked dry. Majority of them wind up leaving. Some fools wind up staying. You also saw a video where he, obviously thinks pedophilism on certain levels is okay. What I mean by that is I don't understand. Again, this is my stance. I don't agree with it. He says he lets his little son, who's about 2 years old, I believe, touch his penis after he has sex with his wives, and that he does it right in front of him. He thinks this is okay. And if you think that that's okay, that's on you. I don't think psychologically there's an understanding of that at that age. That's just I'm speaking of my perspective. So you all recently heard a few months ago, there was a sister that tragically got ill out there. There's a lot of speculation on what went down with that. But again, why I'm in disagreement with it, I'm not in disagreement with the brother where he wants to have his own perspective on knowledge and information. I want to make that clear. Though I don't agree with his knowledge and information because I think he's a space cadet. Because some of the shit that he talks about, that's not the issue that I have. I have an issue with that same cult setup. It's all the same. They find some discrete location. He's the master. He calls himself the master teacher. Y'all heard him in the videos. Where do you think he got that from? Dr. York bullshit. Okay, he calls himself master teacher, and everybody can't even speak a sentence. When you hear any of his members talk, it reminds me of Nuwapians. They have the master teacher said, the master teacher this, the master teacher that, the master teacher. They do the same shit in the few videos they do speak in. So he's a manipulative, quote unquote, cult leader, plays the victim, spools a lot of, to me, it's rhetoric, takes a lot of information, mixes it up, and to me, it doesn't make sense. That's just to me. If you listen to him, and maybe you if you're somebody that watches him and agrees with his shit, hey, that's on you. I'm not going to hold back on my perspective on it. I think the dude is completely fucking bananas. I can't connect with it on any level. He mixes alien extraterrestrial shit with metaphysics, ancient Egypt. Now, you can have your own perspective on subjectiveness, but there's got to be some type of common sense that lines up with it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's got to match up a set criteria of anything that's out there, but there's got to be some type of basic common sense. The dude's all over the place. He's a nuthead. And just like any other cult leader, it appeals to weak-minded, insecure individuals, okay? As I said before, early in this video, the day of the conscious pimp is over. If you're still relying on quote-unquote cult leaders for your salvation, you need to seek some serious psychiatric help. So that's my take on that. All right, we're almost at the bottom here. We're about to wrap this up. Hold on. Thing skipped on me. Damn, this thing jumped on me. My bad. Damn, hold on. Man. All right, what did I do? Okay. Skipping some comments for time's sake. Mario Pope typed in, I make observations of self first so that I know what I need to change within myself. As soon as I wake up, that's my first ritual of the day. That's great. And that's on some shape, form, or fashion, that's the approach you can take because it starts with self. You can't negate that. If self is fucked up and out of whack, everything around you is going to be out of whack. It's going to affect your mood, your personality. It's going to affect your career, your business, your profession, whatever it is you do. If you don't get self right first, everything else is going to fall apart. Okay. All right, what else we got? All right, skipping the personal conversation. Gypsy Guys typed in, I was at the library and asked about some occult books you have to talk about. Reiki crystals, find your way. Go straight to the Bible area and see what they got. Yeah, the library is generic. They're gonna, yeah. Okay. Only types in, a lot of magicians and occultists are discredited in the end, and their archives are stolen and never really celebrated, just abused. And that's true. Because what we're doing here and talking about, this is not considered quote unquote mainstream. So it's going to be ostracized. I even did a video a while back on, is the left-hand path, quote unquote, for melanated people, and of all races, Black, Latino, Asian, all types of ethnicities that might be mixed or tie into the quote unquote Nubian family. It's not, because if we're not talking about Egypt or Africa exclusively, like Ifa, Palo, then it's not considered. And people don't understand that this has its origin in ancient Africa and Egypt. When we talk about all these spiritual systems, Luciferianism, left-hand path practices, whatever you want to call it, path to self, everything we're talking about, because people are under this illusion that this all has its connection. People think that all this is connected with modern-day Satanism, and it's not. It has nothing to do with that. But unfortunately, the ignorant believe it does because they don't take time to do their research. We're dealing with the spiritual system that predates all of this shit people are talking about. Okay, this really goes back to a time frame where you really can't put no time on it. Okay, what I mean by that, before people were identifying with a title or something. This is why I was talking about a little while back. We got to stop exclusively identifying with titles, because you're going to find even some people on the left-hand path are kind of one-minded on their approach to things, because they think that the left-hand path aspect, as an example I was talking about earlier with Luciferianism, as if that's the only way to approach it. So that tends to happen, unfortunately. Here's the funny thing, but in reference to Halloween, right? Now, we're taught in most conscious circles, Halloween, here's his whole rhetoric, Halloween and Valentine, it's all the white man's. Yeah, I get the commercial aspect of it. We ain't talking about buying candy and decorations. If you understand the spiritual significance of Halloween, and don't get into all that religious rhetoric, oh, yes, it is what they call the devil's Sabbath, right? It's a high spiritual energy. It's funny because the Catholic Church acknowledged it. The next day, they have a special mass called All Souls Day, right? On November 1st, acknowledging the dead. In their prayers, they have specific prayers, for the dead. So the whole feast is acknowledging, when you really understand what it represents, it's connecting with those spirits. Different spiritual systems, be it the Druids, be it lighter systems of magic, left-hand path, Luciferianism, we all know it's a high time with a high volatile amount of energy that one can connect with, because it does deal with one, planetary influences. It has an astrological aspect, but it is a celebration and a reverence of what we call the realm of the dead. So understand it from a spiritual perspective. Stop getting into all that commercialization. But look, at the end of the day, if you're caught up in that bullshit, I'll tell you this straight up. I have fun with Halloween. I don't give a fuck if you're in that conscious, you shouldn't be doing that. I don't give a fuck. I'm fucking around with Halloween. I'm having some fun with it. It's my choice. It's what I choose to do. If you don't like it, then just ignore it. Stay out of my way. I stay out of your way. That's all there is to it. Don't run all this rhetoric. You know what's funny? Motherfucker will tell you, Halloween, that's the white man's holiday. You shouldn't be doing it. These are the same motherfuckers that are paying rent to the white man, that pay their mortgage to the white man. They're going to the gas station every week to get gas from the white man. These are the same people that shop in Walmart and supermarkets owned by the white man. These are the same people that go to shopping malls and buy clothes from the white man. So if you're going to sit there and run that bull, unless you 100% non-white man free, don't run that gay bullshit on me, because I'm not even trying to hear that shit. Because you are the same motherfuckers that you turn your money over, and 90% of you are supporting that system in some shape, form, or fashion. Okay? So my approach to that is, as long as you're building stuff up for yourself and know how to connect to that, and you're not a slave to it on some shape, form, or fashion or level, but don't run that bullshit on me. Man, you shouldn't celebrate Christmas. It's the white man's holiday. And this motherfucker sitting there holding a sandwich that he just got from some store that was owned by the white man or the Arab or something. Come on, man, please. You see the delusional fuckery way of thinking that we're programmed with? It don't make no sense. Okay. What else we got? Yeah, Straight Panther makes a good point. People do look at you funny when you go into the occult section of a bookstore. I like to find. I like to go into some of these stores and ask them just to see the reaction on their face, because their eyes get big. Don't even just say occult. Say, you got a section with stuff on black magic, witchcraft and stuff like that. They give you this look like, it's funny. But one thing I learned, I like to toy with people's emotions. If people fear something, I like to test that fear. I like to string them out on that fear. I like to keep them strung out on it. It's a good experiment. Yeah, so you will get those funny looks, whether it's the library or whatever it might be. All right, what else we got? Nevertheless, we know where to look, but I sure got a kick out of it. I was wearing a sigil. This is a Gypsy Goddess. He even wanted my digits, and he ain't on the path, but we definitely should be open. Yeah. Okay, right on Gypsy Goddess. Thanks, everyone. But what else we got? Gypsy Goddess. Yeah, messy car, too. When I was talking, yeah, that's another thing that bothers me. When you get in somebody's car and it's nasty as fuck. I'm sorry, man. I got to stick with my statement. If you're a grimy person, your house is messy, you don't take care of yourself and your appearance, your car is messy, it tells me a lot about what's going on in here. I don't care if you disagree with that. I've found in over my years in dealings with people that turns out to be right 100% of the time. You need external, what you reflect externally should be a reflection of what's going on the inside. So if you're a chaotic, messy individual on the outside, then I know you ain't making order of your chaos on the inside. That's just a reality. Okay. What else we got? Yeah, I think MC Hammer had a sock in his pants on them videos. Oh man, I gotta refer to the and Living Color skit they did on that. That shit was funny as hell. MC Hammer. God, it was one of the wackest shits that ever came out. But hey, brother did his thing, made his money. Apparently, unlike Vanilla Ice, who at least he was smart enough to invest some of his money, got his own. You see, he's got a show where he's like a designer contractor. He rebuilds houses and builds houses and renovates them and stuff. And he's obviously made a life for himself out of one. Well, I think he made 2 albums, if I'm not mistaken, 1 or 2. But think about how Hammer made a few albums, not many. You take an individual like Vanilla Ice, who at least whether he was, you could crack on him, he was garbage and corny, but at least he's still, he's still up and going and got a substantial amount of money off of one whack ass song. That's how it is. All right, what else we got? What else we got? Who are we talking about? Running Jerusalem as an Orthodox Jew. That was by Trina Hurt. Not sure what was that in reference to. All right, I'm going to skip some of these comments. I know it's getting late. Let's see if there's anything here. This is a good comment by... I like this comment right here by Mario Polk. Hey, I got a challenge for all the Egyptian wannabes. Use Metroneto on your job, which is actually not a language at all. Thank you. That's what I was referring to earlier. It's like, come on, man. I mean, if you remember, they still talk about it now in some of these groups, but if you remember like a year or so ago, there was this big debate. There was all these different groups and Sa Neter and House of Consciousness and Sarah Sutanseti, and they were all going back and forth about this Metroneto shit. And that's my whole point. It's like, all right, so what's the whole fucking point? Who cares? Because in 2018, it's irrelevant. It's pointless. Now, if you just want to have a conversation to shoot the shit, I get it. But other than that, how's that going to help me on my path in 2018? When am I going to actually use that in the real practical world? See, the problem what people got to understand with ancient Egypt, that's the whole point. The term is ancient Egypt. Stop trying to resurrect a culture that had its time. It was suitable for that time. What you need to be focusing on, how can I take the core teachings of that culture and apply it in 2018? Because there's a lot of great things in the ancient Egyptian teachings that I could utilize, but how do I update it to today, to the now? The problem is we want to still get caught up in all the shit from back then. And that's what I meant earlier when I said these Egyptian wannabes / Hotepers, Kemetic, conscious coons, they want to get stuck in that back in the day itis shit. That was my whole point. We got to stop sitting there talking about how it was back in the day, because how do I take and update that shit and bring it into 2018? You can, trust me, but I don't see anybody really doing it. That's my whole point. Okay, I think Tyreek was referring to when I was talking about the mirror ritual earlier. I think that's when it says a few days ago, someone came through and my voice changed and my eye filled with water, but I still got the mess. Yeah, when you do work like that, you will, because it's personal. Okay, I'm skipping some of this. Internet, yeah, ghetto soy, right, and yeah. Well, like I was talking about earlier, not to revisit and rehash that whole thing. Yeah, we got a lot of internet thugs and gangsters. They talk shit behind the keyboard, and like mature adults, you understand. Just rather than talk it out as mature adults and say, look, I don't agree with what you're saying. This is my perspective on it. And I got no problem with that. And everybody has heard me millions of times say, I don't want nobody to agree with everything I say. You possibly can't agree with everything I say. That'd be ridiculous. But rather than get emotional, because when we were talking about cognitive dissonance earlier, when a person's beliefs are challenged and then it triggers some type of emotion in them where they want to get aggressive, my whole point is, rather than take that approach, say, let's dialogue about this. And we could still agree to disagree, and that's it. But no, people get mad because if they don't walk away from the conversation having gotten their point across, they get pissed off. You understand? But what else we got? Okay. William Tip, if I'm saying it right. I don't know if I pronounced that right. What's the most secretive information on voodoo principles that you can provide to white boys? I don't think this matter of secretive information. It don't matter if you're white or you're black. It's being able to understand the principles of voodoo. In this case, if we're talking about voodoo, and I'm not sure if that's what you practice, we got to get out of that illusion. The biggest secret is that there is no secret. So a lot of these dogmas are built up on the principles that there's some great secretive information if you join and get initiated. Now, I want to make this clear. Speaking of voodoo, maybe Palo, and some of these other African spiritual systems, now they're secretive in the sense that a lot of the traditions are passed down from mouth to ear. So if you're looking to understand more of a traditional aspect of it, then that's kind of the route you would have to go. So not so much, there's nothing I would sit here and say, any secret principles I would impart on anybody, be they white, black, or Spanish, or Asian, or whatever your ethnicity is. I would say understand the core practices and principles. One, if you're going to work voodoo, and again, this is an in-depth topic, so I'm not going to get too much into it now. I've done plenty of videos on this. I would go look at, there's 2 videos I did a couple of months ago, a 2-part series on the voodoo pantheon. And I would recommend you go watch them because it'll address that question in particular. It'll show you understanding the basics of step 1, having respect for it, because when you're working with that type of energy, you got to understand how it works. And when I say have respect for it, understand what you're working with and why, and not abusing it, because it is a volatile and powerful energy. Basics like setting up altars and knowing how to reverence some of these archetypes and deities, understanding, working with the Gede, the Loa, all those things, the different voodoo pantheon deities. That would be some of the core principles you would need to have down. And understanding, one, what are you trying to accomplish working with it? What are you trying to establish? A consistent relationship? Are you trying to, tap into this energy for specific reasons? Things of that nature. So it's not so much, I would say, imparting secretive information, because like I say, that's the illusion. If you're looking for the traditional aspect of it, where a lot of that stuff is passed from mouth to ear, but what I could recommend you look into is the Voodoo Gnostic Workbook, which gives you more of an esoteric approach to voodoo or voodoo. I would also look into the Voodoo Hoodoo Workbook by Denise Alvarado. It's more of an esoterical approach to voodoo, how I practice it now, prior to when I was working with it as an initiate from a traditional perspective years ago. I don't really mess with any of those systems anymore on that level. I more or less approach it from this mentality and this path. Now, as I said before in the past in them videos, and I would encourage you to go watch those videos because it'll answer pretty much all your core questions on voodoo. I know a lot of traditionalists would disagree with a lot of the things of how we approach it on this path. But as I said before, I couldn't give 2 shits. I'm not interested in anybody's opinion. I'm not interested in what people think in their mind is right or wrong. That's personal. It's subjective. I can only go by what works for me. I can only go by what I've carried out and I get results. And couldn't care what anybody else thinks. It's just irrelevant. But I would suggest you go take a look at those videos. I think it's 2 videos. They're each about 2-3 hours long. So it's about 6 hours worth of information on the Voodoo pantheon. I think it'll answer a lot of those questions. Yeah, my sister only typed in, when I had my reading with Brother B, it was a lot of energy and words that confirmed a lot of things. Yes, and I was back, and when I went up to New York in July, I actually met with her, and we did a reading in her kitchen. And to the term, with my words I create. A lot of things happen, and that particular reading, because as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it before on a video, a few videos back. There was no system really of divination used for that reading, because that's kind of what the spirits dictated. The only thing we had there was candle and a glass of water. And because her connection to that energy made it a lot easier, stuff just naturally, came through. When I was talking about all that stuff earlier, when I was talking about readings, consultations, and doing that type of work as a spiritualist, sometimes that's all you need, the water element, which is just life, and the fire element. You need that harmony of both, and you'll be surprised what can come through with just that. So when we did that reading, there was no cards used. There was no cowrie shells, no system of divination used at all. It was just the elements. That's it. And sometimes the spirit dictates what needs to be utilized in a spiritual reading. It's just the way it is. But yeah, it was a good experience. Okay, what else we got? Okay. Yeah, and I remember when we were doing the reading, her grandfather's picture kept falling over during the reading, because I remember it was her grandmother and grandfather. A lot came up in that reading with their connections to Native American tribes, because I remember when we were doing that reading, I kept seeing her grandmother as a young Native American. And then she had confirmed to me there's that connection to different Native American tribes. So there was a lot of if I could describe it, it was like an army full of Indians sitting around that table with her grandmother, and grandfather. It's like I said, it's hard to explain. And as I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm trying to visualize it, or not trying, visualizing it and trying to put that into words. And sometimes it's hard to explain a subjective, quote unquote, spiritual experience. But when you're locked in the moment and working with spirit, you understand it. But there was a lot of stuff, and some stuff we can't talk about openly. It was personal, but yeah, it's that's the power of this. All right, what else we got? All right, almost there, people. Okay. All right, what else we got? Almost done. I'm almost at the bottom. Let's skip some of this. Okay, I'm gonna see questions. This is kind of conversations between you guys. I'm gonna skip this stuff. Then we'll wrap it up. I didn't realize we're getting this late. Okay, I think that's it. Pumps in the bump. Oh my God, Mujahid. You had to bring up even a more whacker song. Man, let me tell you something, man. I remember when, God damn, you taking me back, because I remember when Hammer came out, I used to be so fucking mad at how whacked he was. And I remember at that time, Fear of a Black Planet just came out by Public Enemy, and Third Base's Gas Face had just come out. I remember there was a period where everybody was dogging them, rightfully so, because it was rough, because at that point, if you understand the history of hip hop was going through a serious, state of elevation, where it was making the transition into mainstream. But then Hammer came along. It's like he had set everything back. And what really pissed me off, don't ask me why I know why it pissed me off. When you could even Google this and pull it up. When that motherfucker Hammer did a commercial for KFC dancing for some fucking popcorn chicken in some genie pants, it was so stereotype looking. He just set hip hop back like 15 years, because All right, when you go back to the history, you're gonna get me on a hip hop vibe now. When you go back to the history of hip hop, right? When Run DMC did Walk This Way with Aerosmith, all right, it was kind of commercial, a little bit corny, but even though Run DMC kind of crossed over, and they're probably, all right, you can get into Rapper's Delight and all that shit with the Sugar Hill Gang, but I'm saying if you really attribute to like when did kind of Run DMC with Rockbox and King of Rock, when did really rap start to make kind of to an extent a mainstream crossover? I would have to really attribute that to Run DMC. But they kind of did it, even though they were a little corny and commercial with some of the material, but they still kind of stayed true to their roots when you really think about it. But Hammer, man, and that's why people were so dogging them. And it wasn't about hating. It was about, because you got to remember, for those that know him were back then, and when hip hop really started to boom in the early to mid 80s, you know, especially if you were in the Northeast, especially in New York. Remember, hip hop wasn't played like now. Now it's garbage. Now you turn on your mainstream radio station and you're guaranteed to hear a hip hop song. It might be the clean version, but you're going to hear all this whack shit on the radio. Back then, you didn't hear no hip hop from Monday to Friday at all during the daytime. For an example, if you grew up in New York, you had to wait till Friday and Saturday night from 8 to midnight. It was either Mr. Magic's Rap Attack, DJ Red Alert, Marley Marl. You had to wait till 98.7 Kiss FM or BLS on the weekends to hear rap music. You didn't hear it at all during. They didn't play not one rap. If you my age, you know what I'm talking about. You didn't hear not one rap song on the radio from Monday to Friday. Trust me when I tell you that. That shit didn't start happening until the mid to late 90s, where rap became more mainstream and being played on the radio. Well, now it's more commercial rap. But for those of us that grew up, we couldn't wait till the weekends came. You understand? And when we would have our quote unquote backyard / basement parties, we didn't even need a DJ. We would go get a big boom box with the big boom box with the equalizer, and that's it. We put on the Rap Attack, got us a keg, some Ford, whatever we were doing, and we just chilled. That's how we partied. But that's how we were able to tap in to the culture. It was different back then. Now it's so commercialized and mainstream that you can turn on the radio, quote unquote, and hear your mainstream cornball rap songs, as I call it. That's just me. Yeah, I'm hating on the new generation. Fuck that. It's garbage to me, just like they might listen to some of my old school shit and say it's garbage to them. But guess what? It's all love, baby. I can respect it. That's my time. That's my generation. I just can't connect with this whack shit they got out now. It's just me. But anyway, yeah, you brought that up with Pumps and a Bump. I mean, you talk about pure fucking garbage. That's got to be one of the wackest, corniest. That's a whole other story. Yeah, Third Base was nice. I don't care what anybody says. For the Beastie Boys and Third Base probably two of the only white rap groups that stayed. You know, they stayed true to who they were, especially the Beastie Boys. Even Rick Rubin and Def Jam, got to appreciate some of the production on there. Now, if you remember in 1986, when those were the two top albums of the year, that's all was being cranked everywhere. It was Run DMC's Raising Hell, which came out in 86, and the Beastie Boys, their album License to Ill. I don't care whether two of the most classic albums of all time. To me, those are the two albums that took hip hop to another level as far as mainstream, worldwide, because I think those albums, summer of 86, there's so much shit that came out. And actually the number one rap song of that year, go look it up, Top Billin' by Audio 2. Most played number one rap song, even on Billboard, and we was cranking that shit everywhere. Top Billin' by Audio 2. Yep. Yeah, speaking of about the boombox, I remember we got our shit stolen one time. I'll never forget. Coming out of White Castles in the wintertime. We were coming down Jamaica Avenue. Some cats rolled up on us. I'll never forget my boy George. That's my boy that just passed away when I went to his funeral in July. I mean, I love that dude forever. We 86, we had just got our goose downs. George had the yellow one with the panther collar. I had the black one with the panther collar. If y'all remember back then, they had the 3/4 goose. They had the the regular goose. So George had the 3/4 yellow. Shit was fly as hell. Yellow. You know that smell of fresh, brand new leather. Panther collar, boom box. We had the music cranking. Well, we was young. We was like 16. We were styling a little too much, bringing too much attention to ourselves. And all I remember is a car rolling up and just motherfuckers saying, "Get on the motherfucking ground, get on the motherfucking, give it up, give it up." They took out gooses. They took the radio. Man, we were pissed. So we went through that. That was our first boom box. But after that second boom box, George and myself, we made sure we had a little piece on us from that. And we vowed, stupid at the time, but we vowed back then, if somebody roll up us on again, see, we didn't have nothing on us. If they rolled up us on again and we was capping somebody, we thought we was tough, 17-year-old punks. But I mean, it's just the way we grew up. But yeah, the boombox with the equalizer, that was the shit. Dual tape deck. I mean, if y'all remember, that's what we would do when the Rap Attack would come on. We'd tape it. You had to have your blank tapes. We'd carry around a pack of blank cassettes, the 120s, bam. Rap Attack, come on. You had the double tape deck going, boom. When that one would run out, we'd have the other one ready to go, boom. You record 3 hours of the Rap Attack. And then you listen through that during the week on your Sony Walkman. Remember the Walkmans with the tape decks? Be riding the bus or the subway, and the Rap Attack that you recorded on the weekend was the shit you listened throughout the week till the next weekend came on. But that's how we stayed. You know what? I'm gonna say honestly, it was a great time because that's when the music to me was more. It was more culture based. There was more of appreciation for it. It wasn't. That's why I can relate to Common song that he put out a few years back. I used to love it when he was talking about how hip hop got fucked over. And to me, that song kind of explains, what happened to hip hop. And he goes through the whole period and the history of hip hop. But anyway, suede Pumas. Oh shit, you know me talk about suede Pumas, Sherlins, what was the other coats we used to wear back in the 80s? Sheepskins. Remember the Gazelles, the raccoon hats, the Kangos, the Bally's. Remember the Bally shoes? Shit, British Knights. Remember all that shit, man. That was a fly shit back in the day, man. That's when there was some, there was some style. Man, you're gonna take me down. Very nice. Sheepskin, man. Remember I had my first sheepskin, man. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. You got me reminiscing and shit. I think we're gonna revisit. I did a show a few months back on all this type of stuff. Maybe we'll do that after the Mystifying Death show, Demystifying Death. All right, but anyway, peace out. Tuesday, we'll see everybody. I will be back on Tuesday evening, 7:30, 8 o'clock, roughly around that time. All right, peace.